Death Is Now My Neighbour by Colin Dexter. Read by Kevin Waitley. What time do you call this, Lewis? The missus's fault, sir. Late with the breakfast. Morse made no answer as he stared down at the one remaining unsolved clue. Stand for soldiers? 5 and 4. Lewis took the chair opposite his chief. Stuck, sir? If I were, I doubt I'd get much help from you. Well, you never know. Ah! Morse triumphantly wrote in toast rack, folded the Times away, and beamed across at his sergeant. You are a genius, Lewis. So you've often told me, sir. And I bet you had a boiled egg for breakfast, with soldiers. Am I right? Chief Inspector E. Morse of the Thames Valley Police HQ grinned. Unlike Morse, Dawn Charles was quite content with her Christian name. Sometimes she'd felt slightly dubious about it, but no longer. Certainly the Chief Inspector would have noted the receptionist with approval. A vivacious, dark-eyed woman, long-legged and well-figured. Most of the consultants greeted her with a genuine smile, several of them these days with her Christian name. Nice. Her job at the Harvey Clinic on the Banbury Road was really enjoyable. She kept 2 jugs of genuine coffee piping hot for her clients, most of them soberly suited, well-heeled gentlemen, and a number of them, as she well knew, most seriously ill. There had been several occasions when Dawn had heard passages of conversation between consultant and client which she shouldn't have heard, or which, having heard, she should have forgotten, and which she should never have been willing to report to anyone. Not even to the police. Certainly not to the press. January 15th was to prove a day easy for her to recall, since it marked the 25th anniversary of the Harvey Clinic's opening, and the clinic had been visited by Radio Oxford, by the local press, and by Mr. Wesley Smith and his crew from Central TV. Particularly memorable for Dawn had been those precious moments when the cameraman moved behind her left shoulder as she ran a felt-tipped pen through a name on the appointments list in front of her. Dawn Charles was always to remember the name. Mr. J.C. Storrs. There was something else she would remember too. Just as the personnel from the media were preparing to leave, Mr. Turnbull, the senior cancer consultant, had passed her desk and walked slowly to the exit, his right hand resting on the shoulder of Mr. J.C. Storrs. The 2 men were talking quietly together. The look on the consultant's face, as far as Dawn could recall, had been neither that of a judge who has just condemned a man to death, nor that of one granting a prisoner his freedom. No obvious grimness, no obvious joy. But the scene had been partially masked from her by a ponytailed reporter scribbling a furious shorthand as he interviewed a nurse, and by the TV crew packing away its camera and tripods. If only Dawn Charles could have recalled a little more. On Monday morning, the 29th of January, she was to hear on Fox FM radio that her favourite consultant, Mr. Robert H. Turnbull, M.B., CHB, FRCS, had been fatally injured in a car accident on Cumnor Hill. Sir Clixby Bream would be almost 69 when he retired as Master of Lonsdale. A distinguished mathematician in his earlier days, the Master had never enjoyed living anywhere as much as in Oxford. 10 years of it now. He'd learned to love the old city more and more, and he would miss the college. But there were consolations, perhaps. He was subject to none of the pressures about moving to somewhere nearer the children, since his marriage to Lady Muriel had been sine pro. Moreover, Lady Muriel had been in her grave these past 3 years. Furthermore, he would be able to sit back and survey with sardonic amusement the infighting that would doubtless arise among his potential successors. It was the duty of the Fellows' Appointments Committee to stipulate 3 conditions for those seeking election as Master. First, that any candidate should be of sound mind and in good health. Second, that the candidate should not have taken holy orders. Third, that the candidate should have no criminal record within the territories administered under the governance of his or her most glorious majesty. Such stipulations amused the Master. Presumably, convictions for murder, rape, sodomy, or treason were to be discounted if shown to have taken place outside the jurisdiction of his or her most glorious majesty. Very strange. Strangest of all, however, was the absence of any mention in the statutes of academic pedigree. Theoretically, there could be no bar to a candidate presenting himself with only a grade E in GCSE media studies. Nor was there any stipulation that the successful candidate should be a member of the college. On this occasion, however, outsiders seemed out of favour. In the senior common room, the consensus was most decidedly in favour of internal preferment, since the college itself could offer at least 2 candidates, each of whom would make an admirable choice. Both had been considered worthy of mention in Debrett's People of Today. Storrs, Julian Charles, born 9th of July 1935, educated Christ's Hospital, Emmanuel College, Cambridge, B.A., M.A. Married Angela Miriam Martin, 31st March 1974. Career, Captain, R.A., Indian Army Reserve. Pitt Rivers Reader in Social Anthropology and Senior Fellow, Lonsdale College, Oxford. Recreations, playing bridge, taking taxis. Was the Senior Fellow of Lonsdale so affluent that he could afford to take a taxi everywhere? Did he never travel by car, coach, or train? Well, certainly on special occasions he would travel by train. Oh yes, as we shall see. Cornford, Dennis Jack, born 23rd of April 1942. Educated Wiggiston Grammar School, Leicester, Magdalen College, Oxford, M.A. D.Phil. Married Shelley Ann Benson, 28th of May 1994. Career, University Reader in Medieval History and Fellow, Lonsdale College, Oxford. Recreations, kite flying, cultivation of orchids. Why was Dr. Cornford so recently converted to matrimony? Had he met some worthy woman of comparable age? Oh no, as we shall see. Dennis Cornford, omnium consensu, was a fine historian with a mind both sharp and rigorously honest. Best known for a monograph in which he maintained that the Battle of Hastings had taken place in 1065. In the Trinity term of 1994, Cornford had taken sabbatical leave at Harvard, and 6 months later, to the amazement of his colleagues, had returned with a mature student who had just gained her master's degree in modern American history. Not all that mature, though. She was 26, exactly half the age of her new husband. It is not likely that Shelley would have reached the semi-final of any Miss Massachusetts beauty competition. Her jawline was slightly too square, her legs perhaps a little on the sturdy side. Yet no one could doubt what Cornford had seen in her. Her shoulder-length brown hair framed a face in which the widely set, dark brown eyes seemed, sometimes, to convey the half-promise of intimacy. From the start, Shelley Cornford was lusted after. Her husband envied. And Dennis Cornford said nothing when, 3 months later, at the end of term Gordy, he noticed beneath the table the left hand of Julian Storrs pressed briefly against Shelley's right thigh, as she sat drinking rather a lot of Madeira after drinking a lot of red wine. The laughing pair leaning together in some whispered exchange. Cornford sought to make little of it. It was perhaps perfectly harmless. Yet he knew he ought to have said a few words. Well, at least it's left on time. Give it a chance. We'll probably run into signal failure somewhere. She smiled. Funny, really. They've been signalling on the railways for, 150 years? 170. 1825, the Stockton to Darlington line was opened. Yeah, Stephenson's rocket and all that. No, my dear girl, that was later. Stephenson's first locomotive was called the locomotive. Not difficult to remember. No. The monosyllable was quietly spoken, and he knew that he'd made her feel inadequate again. She turned away from him to look through the carriage window. She was never able to remember things as accurately as he seemed to expect. Sod him. A few minutes later, he turned towards her, and she felt his dry lips on her right cheek. Sorry. She felt his firm, slim fingers against the back of her wrist. She had never known a man so much in control of himself. Or of her. The train stopped just before Slough. The man and the woman turned to each other and smiled. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "You often ask me that, you know. Sometimes I'm not thinking of anything." "Well?" He lowered his eyes. "Rachel, there's something important I ought to tell you." She turned to him, her eyes suddenly alarmed. He wanted to put a stop to the affair. He wanted to get rid of her. "Tickets, please." The ticket collector looked as if he might be making his maiden voyage. He was scrutinizing each ticket with preternatural concentration. The man took both tickets from his wallet. Cheap day returns. "This yours, sir?" "Yes." "You an OIP?" "As a matter of fact, no. To draw a senior citizen pension, a man has to be 65 years of age. But a senior rail card is available to a man who has passed his 60th birthday, as doubtless you know." "Could I see your rail card, please?" With a sigh, the man produced his card. The spotty-faced youth studied the details. "Valid until the 7th of May, 1996. Issued to Mr. J.C. Stores." At Paddington they waited until their fellow passengers had alighted. Happily, there seemed to be no one on the train whom either of them knew. In the Brunel bar of the station hotel, Stores ordered a large brandy for his young companion, and half a pint of Smith's bitter for himself. He clinked their glasses. "Quite a while since we sat here. A couple of months. 10 weeks, if we wish to be exact. Which, of course, we do, sir." Smiling, she sipped her brandy, feeling good. "Hungry?" "What for?" He grinned. "An hour in bed, perhaps, before a bite to eat." "Wine thrown in?" "I'm trying to bribe you." "I think I'd enjoy that. One condition, though." Almost involuntarily, Rachel James leaned her body backward, thrusting her breasts against the smooth white silk of her blouse. She lifted her hands behind her head to tighten the ring which held her hair in its ponytail. A ponytail 10 inches long. "What?" "You tell me what you were going to tell me on the train." He nodded seriously. "I'll tell you over the wine." Geoffrey Owens had a better knowledge of Soho than most people. He'd been only 19 when first he'd gone to London as a junior reporter and rented a room just off Soho Square. In those days, the mid-70s, the striptease parlours, the porno cinemas, the topless bars had all somehow been more wholesomely sinful. Now Soho had quite definitely changed, more furtive and tawdry, more dishonest in its exploitation of the lonely, unloved men who would ever pace the pavements there. "Looking for a bit of fun, love?" In the early evening of the 7th of February, Geoffrey Owens stopped outside Le Club Sexy. The heavily mascaraed brunette appeared to be in her early 20s, tall in her red high heels, wearing a minimal black skirt and a low-cut, heavily sequined blouse, stretched tightly over a large bosom. "Come in. Join the fun." "How much?" "Only £3 membership, private club, see?" "Is Gloria still here?" "Who?" "If Gloria's still here, she'll let me in for nothing." "Lots of names here, mister." "You don't know Gloria." "What the hell do you want, mate?" Owen's voice was very quiet. "Gloria used to work here. She was a stripper, one of the best." "When was that?" 20-odd years ago." "Christ, she must be a bloody granny by now." "Dunno. She had a child, though, a daughter." "Look, why don't you just fuck off?" "Anyway, if you do come across her, just say you met Jeff Owens, will you? She'll remember me. Tell her I've got a little proposition. You never know, she may be a bit down on her luck. I wouldn't want to think she was on her uppers. Or a daughter, for that matter." "What's a daughter got to do with it?" The voice was sharp. Owens smiled confidently. "Quite a lot, perhaps. You may have quite a lot to do with it, sweetheart." She made no attempt to contradict him. She pointed across the street. "In the pub, half an hour, okay?" She watched him go. She'd never seen him before, but she'd recognise him again. The dark hair drawn back above his ears, tied in a ponytail, about 8 or 9 inches long. Apart from the midnight milk float, the 11:20 was the last train from Paddington. It was only half full, and Owens found a seat immediately. He felt pleased with himself. The assignation in the pub had proved to be even more interesting than he dared to expect. He leaned back and pondered the implications of what he had just learned. Then he picked up an Evening Standard someone had left on the seat opposite. He was reading the sports page when over the top of the paper he saw a man walking back down the carriage before taking his place next to a woman. And Owens recognised him. Recognised Mr. Julian Storrs of Lonsdale College. Well, well, well. And he recognised the woman too. How could he fail to? She was his next-door neighbour. On Monday, the 19th of February, Lewis came into the office at 8:35 a.m. "What's that, sir?" Morse looked down at a page torn from one of the colour supplements. "Special offer. 2 free CDs when you join the music club library." Lewis looked dubious. "Life's not all freebies, you know." "Well, it is in this case. You've just got to have a look at the first thing they send you, then send it back. They even refund the postage." Lewis watched as Morse completed and snipped out the application form. "What CDs are you going for?" "Janacek, The Glagolitic Mass, recorded by Rattle. And Richard Strauss, 4 Last Songs, Jesse Norman." Lewis nodded. The only Strauss he knew was the Blue Danube Man, and he'd only recently learned that there were 2 of those. "Perhaps you'll be in for a bit of a letdown, sir. Some of these offers are not exactly what they promised." "What, you're an expert?" "No, but this chap I know read this advert about a free sex video. Housewives on the job." Morse nodded. "With the milkman, the postman." Lewis grinned. "But it wasn't. Just showed all these Swedish housewives washing plates and peeling potatoes." The phone had been ringing for several seconds, and Lewis now took the call, listening carefully before putting his hand over the mouthpiece. "There's been a murder, sir. Bloxham Drive." The call came through at 8:40. Just over 1 hour previously, whilst the sky was still dark, Mrs. Queenie Norris from number 11 Bloxham Drive, Kidlington, had, as was her wont, taken her 8-year-old King Charles Spaniel along the pathway at the rear of the terrace. That was when she'd noticed it, the cracked back window at number 17. She'd failed to register much surprise, since vandalism there had become commonplace. Back from her walk, though, Mrs. Norris had felt increasingly uneasy. The light in the kitchen of number 17 was still on, and the blind still drawn. She'd knocked quietly, then loudly, against the back door, but there had been no reply. Only then had she noticed that behind the neat hole in the glass of the kitchen window was a corresponding hole in the blind. It was at that point that she'd felt the horrid crawl of fear across her skin. Her neighbour almost invariably left home at about 7:45. Now it was coming up to the hour. Something was wrong, seriously wrong, and she'd rung 999 immediately. 10 minutes later, PCs Graham and Swift forced an entry to discover in the back kitchen the body of a young woman lying dead upon her side, the right cheek resting on the cold red tiles, the light brown hair of her ponytail soaked and stiffened in a pool of blood. Such a copious outpouring of blood. "Oh dear," said Lewis very quietly. Morse said nothing, noting only the bullet wound at the bottom of the neck. She was wearing a white nightdress, over which was a light blue dressing gown, reaching halfway down the slim, unstockinged legs. It seemed logical to assume that the murder had occurred towards the end of breakfast. On the wooden kitchen table was a plate, on which lay a brown eggshell, beside a wooden egg cup, and alongside a white mug bearing the remains of coffee, long since cold and muddily brown. For the present, that was enough. Morse wished to be away from the dreadful scene. When the scene of crime officers arrived, he was glad to leave them to it. Bidding Lewis to initiate some house-to-house inquiries, he stepped out of the front door into Bloxham Drive, now the scene of considerable activity with checkered-capped officers, the flashing blue lights of their cars, a knot of local inhabitants and the media, 2 pressmen, a TV crew from Abingdon, and a Radio Oxford reporter. Morse ignored them all and proceeded to walk slowly to the end of the street, where he turned left down one side of the terrace, then left again, along the uneven paving behind the houses. He completed the circuit, curtly dismissing the reporters with a wave of his hand. Only one feature of the neighbourhood had made much of an impression upon him. A political impression. Very soon there was to be a local council election. Stickers were to be observed in all but 2 of the front windows of the north side terrace. Morse had taken a straw poll of the support from number 1 to number 21. The advantage was significantly with Labour. 6 stickers to the Tories 2. At 11:15, Lewis suggested that someone perhaps ought to say something. "Go ahead," said Morse. For the past hour and a half, police officers had been speaking to residents, taking brief preliminary statements, but as yet nothing official had been released to the media. "Shall I tell them all we know?" "That won't take long, will it?" With which a morose-looking Morse continued his cursory examination of papers, letters, documents, and photographs, taken from the drawers of a Queen Anne-style escritoire. Rather a tasteful piece, he thought. Family heirloom, perhaps? Family. Oh, dear. That was always one of the worst aspects of murders. The family. Lewis was invited by the TV crew to go along the street so that he could be filmed walking. Normal routine, it was explained. So, would Sergeant Lewis please oblige? No, Sergeant Lewis wouldn't. What he would do, though, was try to tell them what they wanted to know. Amid the subsequent chorus of questions, Lewis picked out the raucous notes of a formidable female from the Oxford Star. "What time, Sergeant?" As it happened, Lewis knew the answer. The Jacobs family lived immediately opposite number 17. The lady of the house, in dressing gown and curlers, had opened her front door a few minutes after 7 in order to pick up her milk. Contemporaneously, across the street, another woman, also in a dressing gown, had been picking up her single pint. Each had nodded a greeting. "You're quite sure," Lewis had insisted, "about the time?" Mrs. Jacobs had nodded. "Well, I just watched the news headlines on the BBC One. It was a few minutes past 7, 5 past at the outside." Therefore, there was a time span of no more than half an hour during which the murder had occurred. Between 7:05, when Mrs. Jacobs had seen her neighbour opposite, and 7:35, when Mrs. Norris had first noticed the hole in the window. "Why didn't everybody hear the shot?" asked a young ginger-headed reporter. "Silencer, perhaps?" "That'd be the sound of breaking glass." Lewis nodded. "In fact, several of the neighbours think they heard something. 2 of them certainly did." The reporter from the Oxford Mail now asked a curious question. Not the 2 immediate neighbours, were they? Lewis looked at the man with interest. "Why do you say that?" "Well, the woman who lives at number 19 is stone deaf." "Really?" "And the man who lives there," a finger pointed to number 15, "had already left for work." Lewis frowned. "How do you know this, sir?" "I live at number 15, replied Geoffrey Owens. When Lewis returned, Morse was ready to leave. "Is there a real ale pub somewhere near?" "The Boat at Thrupp?" "Excellent." Morse picked up 2 coloured photographs and 1 postcard, and made towards the front door, handing the keys of the maroon Jaguar to Lewis. Once on their way, Lewis reported the strange coincidence of the pressman Owens living next door to the murdered woman. But Morse, who always looked upon coincidence as the norm rather than the exception, was more anxious to set forth the firm details about Rachel James, for there could now be no doubt of her identity. 29, single, no offspring. She bought the property 4 years ago for 65,000, and the value's been falling ever since, by the look of things. 40,000 at the most now. Bought at the wrong time, sir. She worked as a freelance physiotherapist at a place in the Banbury Road. CV says she went to school at Bodmin Comprehensive. Parents still alive, on their way here. You want me to see them? Well, you are good at that sort of thing, aren't you? What'll you have, sir? Lewis. As Morse tasted the hostelry's best bitter, He passed over a photograph of Rachel James. Good looker, Lewis said softly. Morse nodded. She'd have set a few hearts all aflutter. What else have we got? What do you make of this? Lewis considered the postcard handed to him. First, the picture on the front. A photograph of a woodland ride, with a sunlit path and a pool of azurite bluebells. Turning the card over, he read the cramped lines amateurishly typed on the left-hand side. 10 times I beg, dear heart, let's wed. Thereafter long may Cupid reign. Let's tread the aisle where thou hast led the 15 bridesmaids in thy train. Then spend our honeyed moon abed, with springs that creak again, again. John Wilmot, 1672. That was all. Lewis took a gentle sip of his orange juice. Pity she didn't get round to filling in the address, sir. Aren't you making an assumption? Pardon? Well, you're assuming she wrote it. And she didn't. Well, I think someone wrote the card to her, put it in an envelope, and then addressed the envelope. Why? Because whoever wrote it didn't want anyone else to read it. Why not? It's only a bit of poetry. Is it? John Wilmot, Earl of Rochester, was a court poet to Charles II. The name's genuine, but not the poem. Any English scholar would know that's not 17th century verse. Lewis picked up the postcard again. Well, give me a clue, sir. Well, at certain periods in English literature, all nouns were spelt with capital letters. Now, there are 8 nouns in those lines, each with a capital letter, but there are 9 capitals, forgetting the first words of each line. Which is the odd one out? Lewis pretended to study the lines. I think I see what you mean. Hits you in the eye, doesn't it? That wed in the first line. Obviously. What's it mean? Wed? Well, marry, get hitched, tie the knot. What else? What's it short for? Wednesday. Morse beamed. So we've got a day, Lewis. What else do you need if you're going to arrange a date? A time? Yeah, I see. 10 times. 15 bridesmaids. 10:15. With AM likelier than PM. Where, though? Lewis studied the lines again. Train, perhaps? Well done. Meet me at the station to catch the 10:15. And we know where that train goes, don't we? Paddington. Exactly. If only we knew who he was. Morse now produced his second photograph, a small passport photo. Rachel James was kissing the cheek of a considerably older man, with a distinguished head of greying hair. Who's he, sir? Dunno. We could find out, though, if we put his photo in the papers. A bit dodgy, sir. At this stage, I agree, but we can try another angle, can't we? Wednesday. Woden's Day. Well, you mean he may turn up at the station? Well, if the card's recent, yes. Unless he's heard she's been murdered. Morse drained his glass. Or unless he murdered her himself. You haven't told me what you think about this fellow Owen, sir, the next-door neighbour. Death is always the next-door neighbour, Morse said sombrely. The next meeting of the Lonsdale Fellows had been convened for 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 20th of February. The agenda was short and straightforward. The master briefly restated the criteria to be met by potential applicants: that he be not in holy orders, that he be mentally competent, that he be free from serious bodily infirmity. As far as the third criterion was concerned, Sir Clixby had a sad announcement to make. One name put forward had been withdrawn. Dr. Ridgway, a brilliant microbiologist from Balliol, had developed serious heart trouble at the age of 43. Amid murmurs of commiseration around the table, the master continued, Therefore, gentlemen, we're left with 2 nominations only, unless anyone... No? No. Well, that was pleasing, the master declared. He'd always wished his successor to be appointed from within the college. Voting would take place on the 19th of March. He proceeded to wish the 2 candidates well, and Julian Storrs and Dennis Cornford shook hands like a couple of boxers at the weigh-in for a bruising fight. Well? No external candidate, just the two of us. Julian Storrs closed the front door, and Angela Storrs led the way into the lounge. Drink? I think I may have earned a small brandy. As she poured his drink and a large dry martini for herself, Storrs contemplated the woman he'd married just 20 years ago. Truth to tell, she was aging rather quickly. Varicose veins marred the long, still shapely legs, and her stomach was a little distended around the waistband of the elegant trouser suits, which she almost invariably wore now. The neck had grown rather gaunt, and there were creases round her eyes. Yet the face was firmly featured still, and to many a man she remained an attractive woman. Now her eyes gleamed with triumph. "To you," said Julian. "I've got to win the bloody thing first, you know. No pushover, old Dennis, good college man, fine scholar, married to a second-class tart." Storrs smiled uneasily. "What are your chances, honestly?" Storrs was silent a while. "It means a lot to you, doesn't it?" "To you, too?" "Yes, it means almost everything to me. And I want to be the master's wife, Julian. I want to be Lady Angela. Do you understand?" "Yes, I think I do." "So, if it became known that Shelley Cornford was an insatiable nymphomaniac... Oh, that isn't fair." Angela Storrs drained her drink. "Who said it was?" At 9:45 on Wednesday morning, Lewis was seated strategically in the refreshment area adjacent to Platform 1. He could just read one of the display screens. The 10:15 to Paddington, it appeared, would be leaving on time, but he'd seen no one remotely resembling the man whose photograph he'd tucked inside his Daily Mirror. At 10:10 the train drew in, and passengers were getting on, but still there was no one standing around impatiently as if waiting for a partner, no one sitting anxiously consulting a wristwatch every few seconds. Lewis went out onto the platform, walking quickly along the 4 coaches, but could find no one resembling the man who had once sat beside the murdered woman in a photographic booth. No one. It was then that the idea occurred to him. A young-looking ticket collector was leaning out of one of the rear windows. Lewis showed him his ID, showed him the photograph. "Have you ever seen either of these two on the Paddington train?" The acne-faced youth looked carefully down at the photograph. Someone blew a whistle. "Yes, I have. Him, anyway. You want to know his name? I remember it from his rail card." "What did you tell Dennis?" "Oh, I just said I'd been out shopping. He's got a tutorial anyway." "He told you about the college meeting?" She nodded. "Pleased?" The great cooling towers of Didcot Power Station loomed into view on the left as they drove south along the A34. "What are his chances?" "Difficult to say." "Will you vote for him?" "I don't have a vote." "Unless it's a tie." "Agreed, but that's unlikely." "So you won't really have much say in things?" "Oh, I wouldn't say that. I'll be surprised if 1 or 2 of the fellows don't ask me for a little advice." "And?" "And I shall try to be helpful." "To Dennis, you mean?" "Now, I didn't say that, did I?" Little more was said before they turned off towards the little village of West Ilsley. "I feel I'm letting poor Dennis down a bit," he said, as the dark blue Daimler pulled up in front of the village pub. "Don't you think I do?" Shelley Cornford snapped. "Do you think we should stop meeting?" "Oh, I don't want that." She brushed the back of her right wrist down the front of his dark grey suit. "We can always give luncheon, miss." "Where shall we go?" "Before we go anywhere, I shall want you to do something for me." "You mean for Dennis?" She nodded. "Well, I can't really promise too much, you know that." She moved her lips to his ear. "I can, though. I can promise you everything, Clixby." Dennis Cornford had half an hour to spare before his next tutorial. He was sipping a large Glenmorangie in the White Horse opposite the Sheldonian, and slowly coming to terms with the prospect that in a month's time he might well be the master of Lonsdale College. By nature a diffident man, he was beginning to feel a little more confident about his chances. Life was a funny business, And the favourite often failed to win the derby, did it not? Yes, odd things were likely to happen in life. There'd been just the two of them at the Oxford Physiotherapy Centre, the ground floor of a large red brick house on the Woodstock Road. Rachel James's partner, a plain-featured, muscular divorcee in her mid-40s, could throw little or no light on the recent tragedy. They had decided 2 years earlier to join forces to form their own private practice. The venture had been fairly successful, although they would have welcomed a few more clients. That hers? Yes. Lewis took down a white coat from behind the door. He felt inside the stiffly starched pockets. Nothing. Boyfriends? Lewis asked. Well, she was attractive. There had been a good many admirers, but no one that Rachel spoke of as anyone special. Each of the women had a personal drawer in the office desk, and Lewis looked carefully through Rachel's. Lipstick, lip salve, deodorant, tissues, a pocket dictionary. No personal diary, no letters. Do you want the good news or the bad? The bad, Morse said. Well, not bad really, just not news at all. I don't think we're going to get any leads from a workplace. And the good news? I know who the fellow is, in the photo. What, he turned up? In a way, I suppose. There was no one like him standing around, but I had a word with this ticket collector. He recognised him straight away. He'd asked to look at his rail pass and remembered him because he got a bit shirty. Remembered his name as well. Julian Storrs. For many seconds, Morse sat completely motionless, feeling the familiar tingling across his shoulders. Then he picked up his silver Parker pen and wrote some letters on the blotting pad. I know him, Lewis, he whispered. You didn't recognise him, though? Most people as they get older can't remember names. For them, a name is troublesome. Anagram, 7 letters. Amnesia? Well done. But it's faces I can't recall. There's a splendid word for this. Prop-sop or something? Morse appeared shell-shocked. Prosopanoia? Now, in heaven's name. Well, sir, I didn't do all that marvellously at school, as you know. He glanced at the blotting pad. But I was ever so good at reading things upside down. They had little difficulty finding information on Julian Charles Storrs, to whom, as he now remembered, Morse had once been introduced at an exhibition in the Pitt Rivers Museum. We shall have to see this fella, sir, Lewis said. We shall, but we've got nothing against him, have we? It's not a criminal offence to get photographed with some attractive woman. Interesting, though. Recently I read in the University Gazette that the Master of Lonsdale is about to hang up his mortarboard. Storrs is the senior fellow. See what I mean? I think I do, Lewis lied. If he wants the top job badly enough, and if she reminded him she could queer his pitch. On Thursday, Morse found himself once again wandering around number 17 Bloxham Drive, a vague, niggling instinct suggesting to him that he'd missed something of importance. But he was beginning to doubt it. He was getting nowhere. Upstairs in the front bedroom, he looked down at the double bed. The duvet was still turned back as she had left it, the undersheet only slightly creased. It was not a bed, Morse felt certain, wherein the murdered woman had spent her last night in passionate love-making. Better perhaps if she had. He pulled aside the curtain and surveyed the scene below. One uniformed policeman stood at the gate talking to a representative of the press, the one who lived at number 15, the one with the ponytail, the one he ought already to have interviewed. Then he saw Sergeant Lewis getting out of a police car. Thoughtfully, Morse walked down the stairs, aware that whatever had been worrying him had still not been identified. Lewis was carrying the lunchtime edition of the Mail. The murder still figured on page 1, although no longer as the lead story. Police puzzled by Kidlington killing, it read. The brutal murder of physiotherapist Rachel James has left the police baffled, according to Inspector Morse of the Thames Valley CID. I do wish they'd all stop demoting me, Morse said. At 2:25, Morse got into the maroon Jaguar and after looking at his wristwatch, drove to the Osney Industrial Estate. There was in fact one vacant parking space beside the reception area to Oxford City and County newspapers, but Morse pretended not to notice it. Instead, he asked the girl at the desk for the open sesame to the large staff car park. The barrier lifted as he inserted a white plastic card into some electronic contraption. Then, back in reception, the girl retrieved the ticket before giving Morse a visitor badge and directing him down a corridor to his left to the vast open-plan complex. Owens, the senior reporter and on occasion the stand-in personnel manager, was one of the few employees granted some independent square footage. His small office was hived off by wood and glass partitions. "I'm told you live next door," Morse began. Owens nodded. "Bit of luck." "For me, not for her." "You seem to have been on the scene pretty quickly, sir." "Della rang me. She lives at number 1. She'd seen me leave for work." "What time was that?" 10 to 7, 5 to. "What, you usually leave then?" "I do now. For the past year we've been working flexi-time. The earlier I leave, the quicker I'm here." Morse paused. He'd made a note of exactly how long it had taken him from Bloxham Drive to Osney Mead. With quite a lot of traffic about, 14.5 minutes. "So you'd get here about when?" The reporter shrugged. 15:15? 20 past? Suspicion was beginning to form in Morse's brain. If he had left at, say, 10 minutes to 7, he could have been in the car park at, 7? So I had Owens suggested 15:15, even 20 past. "You can't be more precise." Morse felt the man's shrewd eyes upon him. "You mean the later I got here, the less likely I am to be a suspect?" "Times are important, Mr. Owens, in any murder inquiry." "Oh, yes, Inspector, I've covered quite a few in my time. So why don't you ask Della Cecil what time she saw me leave? She'll probably remember better than me. And as for getting here, well, that'll be fairly easy to check." He took a small white triangular card from his wallet. "I push that in the thing, the what's-it goes up, and something somewhere records the time I get into the car park. This woman who saw you leave, do you know her well?" "Only 20 houses in the drive, Inspector. You get to know most people." "You never became, more friendly? Took her out?" "We've had a few dates, yeah. Usually at the local." "Which is?" "The Bull and Swan." "Ah. Breakspear, Bishop's Finger." "I wouldn't know. I'm a lager man myself." "What about Rachel James? Did you know her well?" "Fairly well." "Did you ever go inside her house?" Owens appeared to consider the question carefully. "Twice. Once when I couldn't find a corkscrew, and one hot day last summer. I was mowing the grass, and I asked her if she wanted me to do her patch. When I'd done, we had a drink in her kitchen." "Lager, I suppose?" "Orangeade." Orangeade. Suddenly Morse realised that at that moment he would have willingly drunk a pint of anything so long as it was ice-cold. Even lager. "She was an attractive girl? She'd have a lot of boyfriends?" "She was the sort men would lust after, yeah." "Have you heard of a man called Julian Storrs?" "Yes, he's from Lonsdale. I interviewed him last year." "You never saw Mr. Storrs in Bloxham Drive?" Owen's eyes looked like those of a deer that has suddenly sniffed a predator. "Never. Why?" "Because," Morse leaned forward a few inches, "someone in the drive, this is absolutely confidential, sir, says that he was seen recently going into a house there." "Which house?" Morse got to his feet. "Just gossip, like as not. But we've got to check out every lead." Owens remained silent. "You've always been a journalist?" "Yes." "Whereabouts?" "In London, around Soho." "I read your piece today. You said Bloxham Drive's a comparatively crime-free area." "Well, we only had one burglary last year. We still get a bit of vandalism, of course, and graffiti. Someone recently unscrewed most of the latches of the back gates. I didn't know there was a market for those." And you're wasting your time if you put up a name for your house. I put a notice on my front gate, lasted exactly 8 days. Know what it was? Morse glanced at the workforce seated in front of the VDU screens at cluttered desks. No free newspapers. At reception, Morse handed in his visitor's badge. "I'll need another thing to get out with." The receptionist smiled. "No, the barrier lifts automatically when you leave." Morse drove to Kidlington HQ, where he looked at his watch again. 9.5 minutes. Only 9.5 minutes. As Morse climbed the stairs to Lewis's office, he was experiencing a deep ache in his calves. Panting slightly, he flopped into a chair. He looked tired. "Interview go okay, sir?" "I wouldn't trust Owens as far as I could kick him." "We've got the preliminary post-mortem report, sir. Bullet entry in the left submandibular." "Lewis, spare me the details. She was shot." "Distance of about 18 inches, it says. Judging from—" But again Morse interrupted him. Eagerly he recounted his interview with Owens. "So, you see, Lewis, he could have done it. 1/4 of an hour it took me to the newspaper's offices, 10 minutes back. So, if he clocked into the car park at 7, say, then drove straight out again, there's no clocking out there, and drove back to Bloxham Close. Drive, sir. Parks his car up on the Dennington Road behind the houses, goes down the grass slope, taps on a window, sees her profile, fires through the window." Lewis nodded. "Then back to Osney Mead. But he daren't go into the car park again, so he leaves his car somewhere near, and then goes back into the office. Nobody much there. Most people get in about 8ish. Quod erat demonstrandum. I know you're going to ask me what his motive was, and I don't know, but this time we found the murderer before we found the motive. Sir, I know you think most murders are committed by husbands, wives, or neighbours, but it just won't hold water. And why is that? Well, this woman from number 1, Miss Cecil, Della. She rang him as soon as she saw the police arrive, just after 8. 1 hour. You can do a lot in an hour." Lewis waited a few seconds. "You drove there in mid-afternoon. But Botley Road in the morning, even early morning, is one of the worst bottlenecks in Oxford. And you want Owens to do 3 journeys. It's just about possible, say, if all the lights are with him every time. But it's very improbable even then. Remember, it's Monday morning, the busiest morning of the week." Morse looked hurt. "What if this woman isn't telling us the truth? What if she never made that phone call at all? What if she's in it with him? You're probably right about the time scale. He probably wouldn't have had time. So she's lying. He got back here, murdered Rachel James, and stayed there. I'm sorry, sir, but she isn't lying. Not about the phone call to Owen's office. We've done quite a bit of checking up already. One of the lads went to BT and confirmed it. The call was monitored, and it'll be listed on her itemised phone bill." "Does it give the time?" Lewis appeared slightly uneasy. "I'm not sure. And if our ace reporter Owens has an answer phone in his office, which he has, you mean he needn't have gone in to work at all? You say that electronic gadget records the card number and the time, but not the car itself?" Morse nodded encouragement. "So if somebody else had taken his card—" Morse finished it off for him. "He's in number 1, she drives off. He walks along the back of the terrace, shoots Rachel, goes back to number 1, rings up his own office number, waits for the answer phone pips, keeps the line open for a minute or 2, and Bob's your father's brother." Lewis sighed. "I'd better go on with a bit of checking, sir. This parking business, the phone call, any of his colleagues who might have seen him. Tomorrow, Lewis." Morse got to his feet. We've got another report from ballistics." "Not tonight." "Very short, sir." He handed Morse the single neatly typed paragraph. "Ballistics report, prelim. 17 Bloxham Drive, Kidlington. .577 heavy caliber revolver, one of the Howder pistols probably, perhaps the Lancaster Patent 4 barrel. An old firing piece, but if well cared for could be in good working nick. Tests progressing." Morse didn't go straight home that evening. Instead, he drove to Bloxham Drive and parked outside number 17. My lucky night, he thought, as he looked over his shoulder to see an ash blonde alighting from her car outside number 1. He hastened along the pavement. "Good evening." She turned towards him as she inserted her latchkey. "Yes?" Morse fumbled for his ID card. "A brief word, if it's possible." "I can't spare much time, not tonight. I've a busy few hours ahead." She led the way through into a tastefully furnished front room, taking off her ankle-length white mackintosh. "What can I do for you?" "I understand my colleague, Sergeant Lewis, has spoken to you already. Nice man, in a shy sort of way." "Really?" "Well, I shan't keep you long, just 1 or 2 questions." "Go ahead." "What job do you do?" She opened her handbag and gave Morse her card, which read, Adele Beatrice Cecil. "As you see, I'm the local agent for the Conservative Party." "Oh dear, I am sorry," Morse said. Was that supposed to be a joke? There was an edge to her voice now. "Not really." "You didn't vote for us today, then?" "I don't live in this ward." "So how can I help?" "Do you know Mr. Owens well?" "Well enough." "Well enough to hand him a scoop?" "Yes." "Have you ever slept with him?" "Not much finesse about you, is there?" "Just up the street there," said Morse softly. "I've got a terrible job to do, and part of it is to ask awkward questions about what's going on in the close. Drive." "You haven't answered my question." Adele breathed deeply. "Once, yes." "But you didn't repeat the experience?" "I said once." "You still see him?" "Occasionally. He's all right. Quite good fun sometimes." When you rang Mr. Owens on Monday morning, just after 8, you say, you did speak to him, didn't you?" "Of course." "Did you know Rachel James well?" "We had a heart-to-heart once in a while." "You weren't aware of any particular boyfriend?" She shook her head. "Do you know a man called Storrs? Julian Storrs?" "Julian? Good gracious, yes. He's one of our vice-presidents. We meet often. In fact, I'm seeing him next week at a fundraising dinner at the Randolph. Would you like a complimentary ticket?" "Perhaps not." Shouldn't have asked, should I? Anyway, I'll have to be off. They'll be starting the count fairly soon. Morse nodded. They walked to the front door, and Morse bade good night to Adele Beatrice Cecil. ABC. The Charwell was a quietly civilised public house where the quietly civilised landlord kept an ever-watchful eye on the bass. The car phone rang as Morse unfastened his safety belt. "Lewis." "I thought I told you to go home." "I've had a session on the phone with the Ox and Cow newspaper, sir. Owen's car park card was registered by the barrier at 7:04 on the Monday morning." "So what?" "Still the card you're on about, not the car." "Please listen for a change, sir. The personnel fellow who looked out the car park thing for me happened to be in earlyish himself last Monday. 7:22. There weren't many others around then, but guess who was? Ponytail and all." "Oh." In that quiet monosyllable, Lewis caught the depth of Morse's disappointment. He understood the long silence at the other end of the line. "Thank you, old friend," Morse said finally. At the bar, he ordered a pint of Bass and proceeded to drink it speedily. At the bar, he ordered a second pint of Bass and proceeded to drink it even more speedily before leaving and driving once more to Bloxham Drive. The Jaguar door closed behind him with its accustomed aristocratic click, and he walked slowly through the drizzle along the street. Still the same count. 6 Labour, 2 Tory, and 2 unprepared to parade their allegiances. Yes. Yes! A slow, beatific smile settled around the mouth of Chief Inspector Morse. As Lewis pulled into Bloxham Drive next morning, Morse was leaning against the front gate of number 17. "How many houses are there, Lewis?" he began. "Not sure." Lewis looked along to the end of the row. 2 other houses, 19 and 21 presumably. On the other side of the street, the last even-numbered house was 20. The answer appeared obvious. 21. That's an odd number, isn't it? You don't build a terrace with one side having 10 and the other side having 11, now do you? You get a bit of symmetry into things. Well, if you say so, sir. I do say so. And I should have spotted it from day one. Those political stickers, Lewis. Let's count them, okay? The 2 men walked along the odd-numbered side of the road. 6 Labour, 2 Tory, 2 don't knows. 10. You see, Lewis, we've been misled by these acts of vandalism here. We've got several houses minus the numbers on their front gates and their back gates. We were confused. Well, I still am, sir. Morse grinned. Write 'em down. How many odd numbers are there between 1 and 21 inclusive? So Lewis did in his notebook. 11, sir. But only 10 houses, Lewis. I don't follow. Of course you do. It often happens in hotel floors, hotel room numbers and street numbers. They miss one out. Enlightenment dawned on Lewis's honest features. Number 13. Exactly. What's it got to do with the case, though? Say you were walking along the back of the houses, starting from number 1. Well, let's just go along there. The 2 men walked to the rear of the terrace, where several of the back gates had been vandalised. Morse reached for Lewis's notebook and put brackets around the missing number 13. Now, take your list, Lewis, and as we go along, put a ring round those gates where we haven't got a number, all right? At the end of the row, Lewis said 7, 15, 17 and 21. So, said Morse, just picture things. You've got a revolver. You walk along here in the half-light. You know the number you want. All you've got to do is knock on the kitchen window, wait till you see the silhouette behind the thin blind, a silhouette with one distinctive feature, a ponytail. Now, you walk along the back. You see number 11. The next house is number 13, you think. And so the house after that must be number 15. And there's the ponytailed silhouette. So you press the trigger. The horseman passes by. But you've got it wrong, haven't you? Your intended victim is living at number 15, not number 17, not Rachel James, but Geoffrey Owens. On Saturday morning, Morse would gladly have turned over and gone back to sleep. But he had much to do that day. Chief Superintendent Strange rested his great jowls on his palms when Morse had finished explaining his latest thinking. It could be a contract killing that went cockeyed, you think? The killer shoots at the wrong pigtail, ponytails her. Through the wrong window. Yes. What about the motive? If somebody wanted Owens out of the way, I can think of a dozen possible motives. Well, because he's a newshound, you mean? Morse nodded. Plenty of people in highish places have got some sort of skeleton in the sideboard. Cupboard. Strange eyed Morse over his half lenses. It won't be easy, will it? You've no reason to think he's got a lot of stuff stashed under his mattress. No, I haven't. And he's definitely out of the frame for Rachel. Afraid so. So we'll think of some way of approaching things. Nothing irregular. Is that clear, Morse? I usually do go by the book, sir. Strange pointed a thick finger. Well, usually's not bloody good enough. You go by the book, matey. Understood? Morse walked heavily back to his office, where Lewis awaited him. So, what's the plan? Just get me a drink first, will you? Coffee? Morse pondered. A pint of natural lead-free orange juice, iced. So what's the plan? Lewis repeated 5 minutes later. I want you to see the big white chief at the newspaper's offices. Get a look at all the confidential stuff on Owens, previous jobs, references, internal appraisals. Gossip? Anything. You're better at that sort of thing than I am. What's your programme, then? Quite a few things, really. Such as? I'm repairing to the local in Cutterslow, where I shall try to thread a few further thoughts together over a pint, and where I've arranged to meet an old friend of mine. And yours. Oh, who's that, sir? It doesn't matter. At 10 minutes to noon, Morse was enjoying his pint. 5 minutes later, Malcolm J. Johnson walked into the pub. "Hello, Malcolm." Morse drained his glass and pushed it over the table. "Coke, is it, Mr. Morse?" "Bit early for the hard stuff. Just tell the landlord same again." A break spear it was, and a mineral water for J. "I'm interested in you doing me a favour," Morse said. J. leaned over the table and spoke quietly. "Tell you what, I got a red-hot video up at the mansion if you—" "Not this morning," said Morse reluctantly. It was his turn to lean over the table. "I want you to break into a property for me." "Ah!" J. grinned broadly to reveal 2 rows of blackened teeth. He pushed his empty glass across the table. "Double vodka and lime for me, Mr. Morse. I suddenly feel a bit thirsty-like." For the next few minutes, Morse explained the mission, and J. listened carefully. "OK," he said finally. "When had you got in mind?" "I'm not quite sure yet." "OK." Morse drained his glass and stood up, wondering whether communication in the English language could ever cope without OK. "Before you go, mineral water, was it?" "Just tell the landlord same again." At 2 p.m, Lewis called back at HQ with a slim folder of photocopied documents and the news that Geoffrey Owens had left to attend a weekend conference on personnel management in Bournemouth. In all likelihood, he would not be back until late on Sunday. "Well done, Lewis. You've done quite enough for one day. Now, I want you to go home. You look weary." "On one condition, sir." "That you go home too." "Agreed. I was just going anyway." "By the way," Morse asked as the 2 detectives walked out, "did you discover which hotel they're at in Bournemouth?" Back in his flat, Morse made 2 phone calls. The first to Bournemouth. Yes, and Mr. Geoffrey Owens was present at the conference. The second was to the Cutterslow estate. "No more booze today, Malcolm." "What, me? Never. What time are you picking me up, then?" "You're picking me up, 7:30 my place." "OK. And just remember, you've got more to lose than I have, Mr. Morse." Yes, far more. Morse knew that. He poured himself a goodly measure of Glenfiddich, and shortly thereafter fell deeply asleep in the chair. The coast seemed clear. Morse looked on nervously as the locksman stood at the back of number 15 Bloxham Drive, methodically doing what he did so well. Then Johnson turned the knob and carefully eased the door open. "You want the lights on?" he asked as he played the thin beam of his torch around the kitchen. "What do you think?" "Yeah, let's have 'em. Let me just pull the curtains, though. Here." The living room was ordinary and somewhat Spartan. The only object which any self-respecting burglar would have wished to take stood above the fireplace on a mantelshelf patinated deeply with dust. A small, beautifully fashioned ormolu clock. Upstairs, the double bed in the front room was unmade, an orange bath towel thrown carelessly across the duvet. The second bedroom was locked. "Malcolm," whispered Morse down the stairs. 2.5 minutes later, Morse was taking stock of a clearly more promising room. A large bookcase, 1 armchair, 1 office chair, set beneath a veneered desk with an imitation leather top. There were 4 drawers on either side, and between them a longer one, with 2 handles. Locked. "Malcolm." 90-second only this time. The side drawers contained few items of interest, stationery, insurance documents, bank statements, pens and pencils. But in the bottom left-hand drawer, a couple of pornographic paperbacks. Morse opened Topless in Torremolinos at random. In its way, it seemed to him surprisingly well written. He made a mental note of the author, Anne Barclay Cox. Then he read the brief dedication on the title page. "For Jeff, from ABC," before slipping the book into the pocket of his mackintosh. Johnson was seated in an armchair in the dark when Morse came down the stairs holding a manila file. "Got what you wanted, Mr. Morse?" "Perhaps. Give me the torch, Malcolm." He shone the beam along an empty mantelpiece. "Put it back." Johnson took the ormolu clock from his overcoat pocket and replaced it carefully on its dust-free rectangle. "I'm glad you made me do that," Johnson confided. "Me conscience'll be clear now." At which Morse began to worry about his own conscience. Quickly he went up to the second bedroom once more and slipped the book back in its drawer. At last, as quietly as it had opened, the back door closed behind them. "You've not lost your old skills," Morse said. "Nah. Know what they say, old burglars never die. They simply steal away." On the mantelshelf in the darkened living room, a little dust-free rectangle still betrayed the spot where the beautifully fashioned ormolu clock had so recently stood. Back in his flat, Morse switched on the electric fire, poured a glass of Glenfiddich, lit a cigarette and settled back in his favourite armchair, with the manila file burgled from Bloxham Drive. The cover was well worn with maroon rings where once a wine-glass had rested. Inside was a sheaf of papers and cuttings. 8 separate items. Item 1, 2 cuttings, snipped from the Sunday tabloids, concerning a Lord Hardiman, together with a photograph of the said peer outside a sex establishment in Hamburg's Reeperbahn. Item 2, a letter from a firm of solicitors in Cheltenham, informing Owens that it was in possession of letters sent by him to one of their clients, and indicating that some arrangement beneficial to each party might be considered. Item 3, a glossy photograph showing a paunchy elderly man fondling a frightened-looking prepubescent girl, both of them naked. Pencilled on the back was an address in St. Albans. Item 4, a brief, no-nonsense letter from a woman, perhaps, in large, curly handwriting. "If you contact me again, I shall take your letters to the police. You'll get no more money from me. You're a despicable human being." No signature, but a Wimbledon address pencilled in the margin. Item 5, 4 sets of initials on a page torn from a diary. AM, DC, JS, CB. There was a small tick in red biro against the first 3, AM, DC, and JS. Item 6, 2 further cuttings, paper-clipped together. The first from the Times Diary, reporting that after a 9-year tenure, Sir Clixby Bream was retiring as Master of Lonsdale College, Oxford. The second, an article written by Owens with a photograph alongside. Its caption read, "Mr. Julian Storrs and his wife Angela at the opening of the Polynesian Art Exhibition at the Pitt Rivers Museum." Item 7, a smudgy photocopy of a medical report marked strictly private and confidential, on the notepaper of a private health clinic in the Banbury Road. Ref. Mr. J.C. Storrs. Diagnosis: liver cancer confirmed. Inoperable. Prognosis: 7-8 months, possibly a year, no longer. Patient notes: honesty best in this case. Next appointment, ASAP. It was signed R.H.T. Clipped to this was a cutting from the obituary column of the Independent announcing the death of the distinguished cancer specialist Robert H. Turnbull. Finally, item 8, 3 photographs. One of a strip club showing the legend "Sexiest, Raunchiest Show in Soho." A full-length black-and-white photograph of a tallish bottle blonde in a dark figure-hugging gown, the thigh split on the left, revealing a length of shapely leg, and a colour photograph of the same woman seated on a bar stool, completely naked, apart from a pair of thin stiletto heels. The legs, now happily revealed in all their lengthy glory, were those of a Sid Charisse or a Betty Grable. Morse closed the file, and knew what he had read: an agenda for blackmail, and possibly for murder. Socrates avowed that death, if it be but one long and dreamless sleep, was a blessing most devoutly to be wished. Morse, on Sunday morning, could certainly look back on his own long and dreamless sleep with a rare gratitude, since lately the commonest feature of his nights had been regular visits to the loo, frequent draughts of water, occasional doses of Nurofen, and finally, after rising, a tumbler of Alka-Seltzer. It was 11:15 when he arrived at HQ, where Lewis had already been at work for 3 hours. The picture of Owens, built up from references, records, gossip, showed a competent, hard-working employee. That was the good news. And the bad? Well, it seemed that the man was aloof, humourless, unsympathetic. "I'll get a statement from the personnel manager, the man who saw Owens on Monday, as soon as he gets back from holiday," Lewis said. Morse looked dubious. "Owens's alibi is neither here nor there, really, is it? You're right, though. Let's stick to procedure. I've always been in favour of rules and regulations." Lewis eyed his superior officer with incredulity. Then he accepted the manila file handed to him across the desk. He began to read. "How did you come by this?" Lewis asked. "Yours not to reason how. He's a blackmailer." Morse nodded and considered the contents once more. Unlike that of the fat child fondler, neither photograph of the blonde stripper was genuinely pornographic. Certainly not the nude one, which seemed to Morse strangely unerotic. "Quite a bit of legwork there, sir." "Yes. Lovely, aren't they?" "No, I meant research, going around." "You need a bit of help?" Lewis nodded. "Sergeant Dixon and a couple of his lads, perhaps." For half an hour the detectives discussed the file's material, until just after noon, in fact. "Coffee, sir?" "Let's nip down to the King's Arms." No, not for me. I can't afford the time." "As you wish." Morse got to his feet. Lewis took a deep breath. "Do you think you should be going out quite so much, sir? On the booze, I mean?" Morse sat down again. "Let me tell you something, Lewis. I care about what you think of me as a boss, as a detective, yes, as a friend. But I don't give two bloody monkeys about what you think of me as a boozer, all right?" "No, it's not all right," said Lewis quietly. "As a friend, I'm telling you that you're buggering up your health, your life, everything." "Listen," hissed Morse. "I will not be told at my age how I'm supposed to live my life, even by you." "Can I say something else?" Morse shrugged. "Perhaps it doesn't matter much to most people whether you kill yourself or not. But I care, sir, and the missus cares." Morse looked down at his desk for some considerable while. "What about that coffee, Lewis?" "And a sandwich?" "And a sandwich." By early afternoon, a strategy was devised. The Owens file would involve a great deal of extra work. Lewis and Dixon were allocated virtually everything, except the Soho slot. "The Soho angle is the most important of the lot," Morse said. "You believe that?" "Certainly. That's why—" The phone rang. Owens, Morse learned, had phoned to report that his property had been burgled over the weekend. "And you're dealing with it?" "Good. I see. Thank you." Morse put down the phone. Lewis looked quizzically across the desk. But Morse shook his head. "No, not the file." "What then?" "An Ormolu clock." "Probably a professional, sir. One who knows clocks." "Don't ask me. I know nothing about clocks." Lewis grinned. "But we know someone who does, though, don't we?" That evening Morse was in bed reading by 9:45 p.m. But soon he was nodding off, the thick book dropping onto the duvet, the whisky on his bedside table unfinished. The result of one election had already been declared, with the Labour candidate now preparing to assume his duties as councillor for the Gosforth ward at Kidlington. At Lonsdale College, the outcome of the second election was still very much in the balance, with the wives of the two nominees very much to the fore in the canvassing. As it happened, each of them, like Morse, was in bed, or in a bed, early that Sunday evening. "Would you still love me if I'd got a spot on my nose?" "Depends how big it was, my love," Sir Clixby said. "But you still want my body, don't you, in spite of my varicose veins?" "You're a very desirable woman, and you know it." He moved his hands down her naked shoulders, and fondled the curves of her bosom. "I hope I can still do something for you. After all, you've promised to do something for me, haven't you?" Sir Clixby should have been a diplomat. "You know, I thought the bishop was never going to finish tonight, didn't you? I shall have to have a word with the chaplain." She moved closer. "Come on, we haven't got all night. Julian's train gets in at 10:10. Shelley Cornford was always a long time in the bathroom. When finally she came into the bedroom, her husband was sitting up against the pillows, reading the Sunday Times book section. She got into bed and turned towards him. "Why wasn't Julian at dinner tonight?" "Up in Durham, some conference. He's back tonight. Angela's picking him up from the station." "Oh. Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason, darling. Sweet dreams." She turned her back towards him. "Don't be too long with the light, please." He so very nearly said something at that point, but he decided not to. A few minutes later she was lying still, breathing rhythmically. Dennis turned off the light and tried far too hard to go to sleep himself. After evensong that evening, he'd looked around for his wife and found her speaking to David Mackenzie, one of the younger dons, a brilliant mathematician. Nothing in that. Not in itself. No. But there was something else. The two of them had been giggling together like a pair of adolescents, and she'd put a hand on his arm. It was as if they'd established a kind of intimacy from which he was excluded. It had been only a small incident, and he'd never been a jealous man, not if he could help it. It was ridiculous to worry about such a thing. Item 2 in the manila file was OBE, overtaken by events in Morse's shorthand. The Cheltenham firm of solicitors had been disbanded in 1992, its clientele dispersed. Item 3 had been entrusted into the huge hands of D.C. Elton, who'd asked no questions as he looked down at the paunchy paedophiliac from St. Albans. "Leave it to me, sir." Also OBE was Item 4. The address Owens had written on the letter had been that of a home for the mentally handicapped in Wimbledon. A social services inspection had uncovered gross malpractices, and the establishment had been closed down 2 years previously. Now Morse contemplated once more the 4 sets of initials that comprised Item 5. AM, DC, JS, CB, with the small ticks against the first 3. "Any ideas?" "Julian Stores for JS." Morse grinned. "Perhaps all of them are dons at Lonsdale. I'll check. I'll leave items 6 and 7 in your capable hands, Lewis. So that leaves item 8. And Owens told me he worked for quite a while in Soho." "So you'd like to do that bit of research yourself?" "Exactly. I'm better at that sort of thing than you are." From Paddington, Morse immediately took a taxi to New Scotland Yard. Sergeant Rogers of the Pawn Squad was awaiting him as he stepped out of the lift at the 4th floor. In Rogers' office, Morse produced the photograph of the strip club. With the speed of an ornithologist recognising a picture of a parrot, Rogers identified the premises. "Just off Brewer Street." The early evening was overcast, drizzly and dank. In the narrow, seedy-looking thoroughfare, a succession of establishments promised XXXX videos and magazines, imported, sex shows, live, striptease, continuous, and freshly made sandwiches, various. Le Club Sexy was now rechristened Girls, Girls, Girls. "Coming out the drizzle, sir. Lovely girls." Morse showed his ID card and moved into the shelter of the tiny foyer. "Do you know her?" "No." The young woman in the black miniskirt barely glanced at the photograph. "Who runs this place? I want to see him." "Her. But she ain't here, is she? Call back later." A helmeted policeman was ambling along the opposite pavement, and Morse called him over. "Oh, OK," the girl said quickly. "Me mum used to know her." She disappeared down the dingy stairs. 3 minutes later, Morse had an address in Praed Street. He now took the tube back to Paddington. It had been a roundabout sort of journey. She was in. Yeah, Angie Martin, toffee-nosed little tart. Tell me about her. You were the second one, ain't you? One of my officers, yes. Nah, he wasn't fuzz. Give me a couple of 20s. What did he want to know? Same as you, like as not. She was quite a girl, they say. Yeah, men used to love her. Stick fivers down her boobs and up her suspenders, know what I mean? She packed 'em in. Yeah, real bit of class, Angie. And then? Then there was this one fella. He got starry-eyed, took her away, a silly sod. Posh sort of fella. Morse showed her the photograph of Mr. and Mrs. Julian Storrs. Yeah, that's Angie, ain't him? Do you know why I'm asking about her? She looked at him shrewdly, an inch or so of grey roots merging into yellow wiry hair. Got a good idea. She's trying to forget who she was, is she? Didn't want to say she were a cheap tart who'd open her legs for a fiver. Mission accomplished. Morse walked across Praed Street and into Paddington Station, where he stood debating the wisdom of purchasing a second ticket to Piccadilly and the attractions of Soho. Julian Storrs had not been able to give Lewis much time until late afternoon, but he was ready and waiting when at 4 o'clock precisely the doorbell rang at his home, a large red-bricked property in Polstead Road. Lewis accepted the offer of coffee, and the two of them were soon seated in armchairs in the high-ceilinged living-room. Storrs said nothing as he glanced down at the passport photograph that Lewis handed him. That is you, sir. You and Miss James. Yes. You were having an affair? I suppose we were. Did anybody know about it? I hoped not. Do you want to talk about it? Storrs talked. He'd first met her just over a year earlier, when he'd pulled a muscle jogging. She was a physiotherapist, masseuse, whatever they called such people now, and after the first 2 or 3 sessions they'd met outside the treatment room. He'd fallen in love with her a bit. A lot. Must have done, when he considered the risks he'd taken. About once a month they'd managed to be together when he had some meeting to attend in London. They'd book a room in one of the hotels behind Paddington, drink a bottle or 2 of champagne, make love most of the afternoon, and, well, that was it. Expensive sort of a day, sir. Not really. Off-peak day returns, one of the cheaper hotels, middle-range champagne, and a pub sandwich at lunchtime. 120 would cover it. Does Mrs. Storrs know about this? No, and she mustn't. Why didn't you get in touch with us? We made several appeals for anybody who knew Rachel to come forward. I was anxious not to get drawn into things. Nothing else? What do you mean? Was someone trying to blackmail you, sir, about your affair? Good God, no. What makes you think that? Lewis drank the rest of his coffee before continuing quietly. I don't believe you, sir. And slowly the truth, or some of it, was forthcoming. Storrs had received a letter about a fortnight earlier. No signature, from someone giving a P.O. box address. Someone claiming to have evidence about him which would be shouted from the rooftops unless a payment was made. Of? £5,000. And you paid it? No. But I was stupid enough to send 1,000. Did you get this evidence back? Storrs shook his head. Did you keep the letter? No, lied Storrs. Did you keep a note of the box number? No, lied Storrs. Was it care of one of the local newspapers? Yes. The Mail? The Times. The door to the living room opened, and there entered a darkly elegant woman, incongruously wearing a pair of sunglasses and dressed in a black trouser suit. Legs right up to her armpits, as Lewis was later to report. Angela Storrs picked up the empty cups. Another coffee, Sergeant? No, thanks, that was lovely. As she closed the door softly behind her, Lewis wondered whether she'd heard what her husband had said. Or had she known it all along? Do you mind, sir, he continued, telling me exactly what you were doing between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. last Monday. Last Monday? Ah. Lewis sensed that Storrs had suddenly relaxed, as if the tricky part of the examination was now over. I was in bed with my wife. We were having sex. I recall this so readily because such an occurrence has not been common these past few years. I remember Mrs. Storrs wanting the news on at 7:30. We caught the headlines on the half-hour. Would Mrs. Storrs remember, as clearly as you say? Why don't you ask her? I think that would be helpful, yes. Storrs got to his feet as Lewis asked a final question. You're standing for the Mastership of Lonsdale, I understand, sir. Yes, so you can see why all this business. Of course. There are just the two of us, Dennis Cornford and myself. May the better man win. Storrs walked towards the door and called through to his wife. That evening, the clouds were inkily black, and at 6:45 the rains came. Dennis Cornford looked out through the window onto Holywell Street, where the rain bounced off the surface of the road like arrowheads. St. Peter's, dinner 7 for 7:30, was only 10 minutes' walk away, but he was going to get soaked. What do you think, darling? Give it 5 minutes. If it keeps on like this, I should get a cab. She came up behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders. Dennis, do you really want to be master all that much? He turned towards her and looked directly into her dark eyes. Yes, Shelley, I do. Not so badly as Julian, perhaps, but enough. What would you give to be master? Most things, I suppose. Give up your work? A good deal of that would go anyway. Would you give me up? He took her in his arms. Of course I would. You don't really mean... He kissed her mouth with a passionate tenderness. I'll ring for a cab, Shelley Cornford said. On Mondays, the Don's attendance at Lonsdale dinner was usually small, but Roy Porter would be there. Angela Storrs knew that. Roy Porter was always there. She rang him in his rooms. Roy? Angela? You're dining tonight? Yep. Would you like to come along afterwards and cheer up a lonely old lady? Julian away? Some brains trust at Reading University. Shall I bring a bottle? Plenty here? Marvellous. 9ish? Is it something you want to talk about, or just... Why not both? You want to know how things are going with the election. I'm making no secret of that. You do realise I don't know anything definite at all. I don't expect you to, but I'd like to talk. Of course. And I've been speaking to Julian. There are 1 or 2 little preferments in the offing, if he's elected. Really? But, like you, I don't know anything definite. I understand. But it'll be good to be together again. Oh, yes. Have a drink or 2 together. Or 3. Or 4. The phone rang at 7:05. Shelley? Yeah? Dennis gone? Left 15 minutes ago. So? So? So you're free and I'm free? Me come to the Master's Lodge? No chance. Far too dangerous. I agree, but you see, one of my colleagues is off to Greece. He's left me his key, just up the Banbury Road. I'd just love to be with you. Sir Clixby's voice became softer, more serious. I need you, Shelley. Please come. I'll get a taxi to you in 10 minutes, if that's all right. There was silence on the other end of the line. Shelley? Yeah? Will that be all right? No, she replied quietly. No, it won't. I'm sorry. The line was dead. Just before 9 o'clock, Cornford rang home from St. Peter's. Look, darling, I've just noticed in my diary you've not had a call tonight, have you? Shelley's heart registered a sudden sharp stab of panic. No, why? It's just that the New York publishers said they might be ringing. If they do, tell them I'll ring them back. All right? Fine, yes. See you soon. I hope so. Shelley put down the phone slowly. "I've just noticed in my diary," he'd said. But he hadn't, she knew that. She'd looked in his diary earlier that day to make sure of the time of the St. Peter's dinner. That had been the only entry on the page. Just before 10 o'clock, Julian Storrs rang his wife from Reading. The number was engaged. He rang 5 minutes later. The number was still engaged. He rang again after a further 5 minutes. She answered. "Angie, I've been trying 20 minutes. Well, I've only been talking to Mum, for Christ's sake. It's just that I shan't be home till after midnight, so I'll get a taxi. Don't worry about meeting me." "OK." After she had hung up, Angela Storrs hurriedly rang her mother in South Kensington and kept on talking. The call would be duly registered. Suddenly she felt considerably easier in her mind. Morse caught the 23:48 from Paddington that night, deeply disappointed by his evening in Soho. At 1:10 a.m, as he walked to the taxi rank, he reminded himself that life was always full of disappointments. The most immediate being that not a single taxi was in sight. When Lewis arrived the following morning, an unshaven Morse was still in his pyjamas, feeling rough as a bear's arse, whatever that was supposed to mean. They exchanged information about their previous day's activities, and soon the truth could be simply stated. Owens was a blackmailer, with the Storrs the principal victims. He for his infidelity, she for her past as a shop-soiled Soho tart. Certainly any disclosure was likely to damage Julian Storrs' chances of election to the mastership. "They've narrowed it down to the two candidates," Lewis said. "Storrs and a fella called Cornford, Dennis Cornford. He's a Lonsdale man too. They say the odds are fairly even." "Who's they?" "One of the porters there. We used to play cricket together." "Ridiculous game." "I'm seeing his lordship, Sir Clixby Bream, at 12. Then I'm going to find out who's got access to the photocopier at the Harvey Clinic." "Waste of time," mumbled Morse. "Oh, I don't know, sir. I've got a feeling it may all tie in somehow." "What with?" "Well, I'll know more after I've been to Lonsdale." "What's your programme, sir?" Morse looked at his wristwatch. "I've got a meeting at 11:30. Nothing else much. Perhaps I'll do a bit of thinking. It's high time I caught up with you." Lewis was aware that Morse seemed distanced, almost in a world of his own. He looked uneasily at his superior. Then Morse stroked his bristly chin and sighed wearily. "We've a wonderful motive for one of the Storrs murdering Owens. Not much of one for murdering Rachel. Unless Mrs. Storrs was jealous. Doubt it. Perhaps Rachel got to know something and was doing a bit of blackmailing herself. She needed the money." "Yes, she knows she can blackmail him. Perhaps our Mrs. James was getting a bit of a handful for our Mr. Storrs. What do you think?" But Lewis was given no time at all to think. "We've come round to the idea that somebody was trying to murder Owens, and murdered Rachel by mistake, haven't we? But perhaps we're wrong, Lewis. Perhaps we're wrong." Morse got to his feet. "I'd better have a quick shave." "I'll be off then, sir." "No, you won't. You can run me down to Summertown." As they waited at the traffic lights by South Parade, Morse suddenly stiffened in his safety belt. "What did you say the name of that other fellow was? The chap who's standing against Storrs?" "Cornford. Dennis Cornford." D.C., Lewis. You remember? In the file, those initials." Lewis nodded. In his mind's eye, he could see that piece of paper. A.M. D.C. J.S. C.B. "Angela Martin," said Morse. "Dennis Cornford, Julian Storrs, and... might it be Sir Clixby Bream?" "You think Owens might have got something on all—" "Slow down," Morse interrupted. "Just there." Lewis stopped outside the Summertown Health Centre. "Wish me well," said Morse. "How can I help?" Dr. Roblin asked. "I think I've got diabetes." "Why do you think that?" I've got the symptoms. Which are? Loss of weight, tiredness, longing for drinking. You've had the last one quite a while, haven't you? Morse nodded wearily. I could sleep all the time, and I'd drink a gallon of tap water a day. Or as well as the beer. Morse was silent as Roblin jabbed a lancet into the little finger of his left hand, then smeared the blood onto a test strip. After 30 seconds, he looked down at the reading. How did you get here, Mr. Morse? Car. Is it here? No, I had a lift. Why? Well, I'm afraid I couldn't let you drive now. Why's that? It's serious. You should have seen me before this. Your blood sugar level's completely off the end of the chart. We'll have to get you to the Radcliffe as soon as we can. What are you telling me? Your pancreas has packed in completely. You'll certainly be on 3 or 4 injections of insulin a day for the rest of your life. You may well have done God knows what damage to your eyes and your kidneys. We shall have to find out. The important thing is to get you in hospital immediately. He reached for the phone. Hello? Hello, Summertown Health Centre. Can you get an ambulance here? Straight away, please. Thank you. You don't realise I'm in the middle of a murder inquiry. But Dr. Roblin had dialed a second number. David, have you got a bed ready? Bit of an emergency, yeah. Mr. Morse. Initial E. Half an hour later, Morse found himself lying supine in a pair of red striped pyjamas in the Geoffrey Harris ward in the Radcliffe Infirmary. The tube from an insulin drip was attached to his right arm by a sellotaped needle. Morse was glumly considering this tube when Dr. Matthews, the senior consultant, came round and sat on the side of his bed. I'm in the middle of a murder inquiry, Morse reiterated. Unless you want to kill yourself, you're going to forget all about that. With a bit of luck, you may be all right. So far, you don't seem to have done yourself all that much harm. Enough, though. But there's so much to do. Weren't those the words of Cecil Rhodes? I think they were. The last words, as I recall. Morse was silent. And I'm not allowing you any visitors, not even close relatives. I haven't got any. Well, you've already had somebody waiting to see you, a fella called Lewis. Temporarily, Chief Superintendent Blair from Oxford City Force had been given responsibility for the Rachel James murder inquiry. That afternoon, Lewis brought him up to date with the latest developments. Not that they'd amounted to much. Lord Hardiman, aged 87, a victim of Alzheimer's disease, was unlikely to squander any more of his considerable substance in riotous living along the Reaper Barn, whilst the child fondler from St Albans was confined for the immediate future in Reading Jail. More interestingly, Lewis was able to report on his interview with Sir Clixby Bream, who had given him a copy of the college statutes, with their emphasis upon the need for candidates for the mastership to be in good physical health. Somehow, Lewis said, Owen's got to know that Storrs hasn't got much time left, didn't he? But we're still no nearer finding out how Owen's got a copy of his medical report. No. I went to the Harvey clinic again. The doc who wrote it got himself killed, and all his records have been reallocated. They're in a mess, you mean? Lewis nodded. So Owens has 3 things on him now. Angela Storrs past, Rachel James, and he knows Storrs is pretty certainly hiding his medical condition from the college. From everybody, perhaps. Well, his wife, too, Blair asked. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, Morse once told me that any quack who tells you when you're going to die is a bloody fool. He's told me the same thing about a dozen times. He'll have to take things more easily now. Would you care to tell him? No. Just one more thing, sir, about Owens. I think we ought to consider the possibility that he's in a bit of danger. What do you suggest? Well, that's the trouble. We can't just give him a bodyguard, and we can't bring him in. Not yet. No. We need something to charge him with. What's Morse think? Said he could look after himself, said he's a survivor. Let's hope he's right. Sometimes he is, sir, said Lewis. Sister Janet McQueen, a darkly attractive, amply bosomed woman, had been considerably concerned about her new patient, one E. Morse. Patently, in spite of his superficial patter, the man knew nothing whatsoever of medicine, and appeared strangely unconcerned about his physical well-being. On several occasions during the following days she'd spent some time with him, acquainting him with the purpose of the prescribed medication. Single-use insulin syringes, human ultratard, human act rapid, Unilet lancets, Exactech reagent strips, enalapril tablets, furosemide tablets, nifedipine capsules. He'd seemed to understand most of it, she thought, and from their first meeting she'd realised that the prematurely white-haired man was unusual. "Glad about the pills," he'd said. "You are? Different colours, aren't they? That's good. Gives a man a bit of psychological confidence. In the past I've always thought that confidence was a bit overrated. Not so sure now." She made no answer, but she knew that she would look forward to talking with this man again. By Tuesday evening, Morse's blood sugar level had fallen dramatically, and on Wednesday morning Sister McQueen came to his bedside, her fingers feeling his pulse as she flicked the watch from the starched white lapel of her uniform. "Shall I survive till the weekend?" "You hardly deserve to." After she'd gone, Morse picked up the ABC Murders, which he'd found in the meagre ward library. He'd always enjoyed Agatha Christie. ABC. Adele Beatrice Cecil, Anne Barclay Cox. Within 5 minutes, Morse was asleep. On Thursday afternoon, a slim, rather prissy dietitian came to talk at inordinate length about such things as calories and carrots and carbohydrates. "And if you ever feel like a pint of beer once a week, well, you just go ahead and have one." Morse's spirit groaned within him. The senior consultant himself came round again the following morning. The drip had long gone. Blood readings were gradually reverting to a manageable level. Blood pressure was markedly down. "You've been very lucky," Matthews said. "I don't deserve it." "No, you don't." "When are you going to let me go?" "Tomorrow, perhaps. Myself, I'd take a fortnight off." "I'm almost sorry to be going," said Morse. "You'll miss us," Sister McQueen said. "I'll miss you." "Really?" "Could I ring you here?" "Don't ring us, we'll ring you." "You mean you will?" She shook her head. "Perhaps not. And it doesn't matter, does it? What matters is that you look after yourself. You're a nice man, and I'm so glad we met." Smartly dressed in clean white shirt and semi-well-pressed grey flannels, Morse was listening to the last few minutes of the morning service when Lewis was quickly admitted. "Shh! My favourite hymn." After it had finished, Lewis said, "Didn't know you were interested in that sort of thing." "Oh, I still love the old hymns. The more sentimental, the better." "It's really good to have you back, sir." Apparently unaware that any words of gratitude were called for, Morse asked about the case, and learned that Blair was IC pro tem. "David Blair. Best copper in the county. Apart from me, of course." And suddenly Lewis felt happy that he was back in harness with this arrogant, vulnerable man. "And what new facts have you got for me?" So Lewis told him. Precious few. It was 10 minutes short of noon when Morse dropped the bombshell. "The Charwell, do you think, Lewis?" "But beer's full of sugar, isn't it? You can't—" "Lewis, this diabetes business is all about balance. I've got to take insulin to counteract the sugar intake, but if I didn't have any sugar intake to counteract, I'd be in one hell of a mess. I'd become hyperglycemic, and you know what that means." Not having the least idea, Lewis remained silent, as Morse took out a black pen-like object from his pocket, screwed off one end, removed a white plastic cap from the needle, twisted a calibrator at the other end, unbuttoned his shirt, and plunged the needle deep into his midriff. Lewis winced. But Morse seemed pleased with himself. "See, that'll take care of things, no problem." "I've been waiting a long time for this," Morse enthused, burying his nose in the froth, taking a gratifying draught of Bass and showing, as he relaxed back, a circle of blood on his white shirt. "What do you say about us seeing Stores and Owens this afternoon?" He'll have a job with stores, sir. Him and his missus are in Bath for the weekend. What about Owens? Dunno. One way of finding out, Lewis. For heaven's sake, sir, you've been in hospital a week. 6 days, for observation. But he got no further. Framed in the doorway, jowls a-quiver, stood Chief Superintendent Strange, looking around, spying Morse. I might have known it. Straight into the nearest boozer. Like a beer, sir? Lewis asked. Large malt. Same again for me, Morse prompted. If you're back at work, you'd better get off your arse, matey. You can forget the beer and get over smartish to Bloxham Drive again. Number 15 this time, another murder. Chap called Owens. Deja vu. The street, the police cars, the curious onlookers, the soccos, repetition everywhere, as if nothing was found only once in the world. Just that single significant shift. The shift from one terraced house to another, immediately adjacent. Morse said nothing as he sat in the kitchen of number 15, elbows on the table, head resting on his hands. For the moment, his job was to bide his time. Anything I can do, sir? Lewis asked. Just nip out and get me the Independent on Sunday, will you? And a packet of Dunhill. Do you think... But Lewis stopped and waited as Morse reluctantly took a £5 note from his wallet. For the next few minutes, Morse was aware that by rights he should have felt weary and defeated, but physically he felt considerably fitter than he had a week before. His brain, though, was still frustrated and unproductive. And there was something else. For a good while now he had been conscious that he might well have missed a vital clue, something he couldn't quite catch. It was like going through a town on a high-speed train, when the eyes almost caught the name of the station as it flashed across the carriage window. Lewis returned 5 minutes later with the cigarettes and with the newspaper, which Morse opened at the cryptic crossword. One across. Some show dahlias in the Indian Pavilion. 6. Howdah. Excuse me, sir, but how do you get that? Easiest of all the clue types, that. The letters are all there in their proper order. It's called the hidden type. Oh, yes. Lewis looked, and for once, Lewis saw. Now give me the latest news on things here. Owen's body Morse had already viewed, sitting back, as it had been, against the cushions of the living-room settee, his face unshaven, his long hair loose to the shoulders, his eyes staring, and 2 bullet wounds showed raggedly in his chest. Dead 4 to 6 hours, Dr. Hobson had suggested. Death, she claimed, had certainly been instant. There were no signs of forcible entry to the house. The body would probably not have been discovered that day had not John Benson, a garage mechanic, agreed to fix a few faults on Owen's car. But Benson had been unable to get any answer when he called just after 11:15, and had finally peered through the open-curtained front window. House-to-house inquiries were now underway, and thus far no one, it appeared, had seen or heard anything untoward that morning. Morse was predictably pessimistic. Early Sunday morning was not a time when many people were about. At 2:30, he was informed that few of the neighbours were likely to be helpful witnesses, except the old lady in number 19. Morse should see her himself, perhaps. Want me to come along, sir? No, Lewis. You try to find out something about Stores and his missus. Probably left details of where he'd be at the Porter's Lodge, that's the usual drill. And do it from HQ. Better keep the phone here free. Mrs. Adams was a small old lady who had lost much of her wispy white hair and even more of her hearing. But her wits were sharp enough. She'd slept poorly the previous night, got up early and gone out the back to empty her waste-bin. That's when she'd seen him. Him? Pardon? You're sure it was a man? Oh, yes, about 7:25. But you didn't hear any shots or bangs? Pardon? Morse let it go. As he prepared to leave, he gave her his card. I'll leave this with you, Mrs. Adams. If you remember anything else, please get in touch with me. He left her there in her kitchen, holding his card about 3 or 4 inches from her pale, rheumy eyes, squinting obliquely at the wording. She was not, as Morse quickly realised, ever destined to be called before an identity parade. Poor Mrs. Adams. Sans eyes, sans teeth, sans hair, sans ears, and very soon, alas, sans everything. Seldom in any investigation had Morse so sadly mishandled a key witness. The manager of Bath's Royal Crescent Hotel was an appropriately cautious man, but one who was fully cooperative once Lewis had explained the delicate nature of his inquiries. He would ring back within half an hour. Lewis picked up the previous day's Daily Mirror and sat puzzling over whether the answer to 1 across, river, 3, was cam, D, X, fal. Finally, he decided on cam when he saw that it could fit neatly with cod, the obvious answer to 1 down, fish, 3. But thereafter he proceeded little, since the combination X and eel had wholly eluded him. He had, however, no time to return, literally to square one, since the phone rang. Mr. and Mrs. J. Storrs had checked into the hotel at 4 p.m. the previous afternoon. Just the one night. The purpose of their visit had been to hear the Bath Festival Choir at the Abbey, where the Fauré Requiem was the centrepiece of the evening concert. The couple had been back in the hotel by about 9:30 for a late, pre-booked dinner. No one, it appeared, had seen the couple after about 11, when they'd been the last to leave the restaurant. Mr. Storrs, however, had rung room service to order breakfast for 2 in their room at 7:45 a.m, a full English breakfast for himself, a continental for his wife. Latest check-out from the hotel was noon, but the Storrs had left a good while before then. The account had been settled by Mr. Storrs on a Lloyd's Bank gold card, and one of the porters had driven the BMW round to the front of the hotel from the rear garage. So, that was that. Or almost. Since Lewis was aware that Morse would hardly be overjoyed with such findings, he asked a few further questions. "I know it's an odd thing to ask, sir, but are you completely sure that these people were Mr. and Mrs. Storrs?" "Yes, they were here 12 months ago, and Mr. Storrs signed the credit card bill, didn't he? Should be easy to check that." "And you're quite sure it was her, Mrs. Storrs? Is there any possibility at all that he was spending the night with someone else?" The laugh at the other end of the line was full of conviction. "Not a chance. Everyone here remembers her. She's, a bit sharp, if you follow my meaning. Nothing unpleasant, don't get me wrong, quite the lady, really, but a bit, severe. Anyway, she recognised me. I happened to be in the reception when they booked in. We had quite a little chat. She told me they'd spent their honeymoon here, in the Sarah Siddons suite." So, that was that. An alibi for both of them. A few minutes later, Lewis rang the Storrs' residence in Polstead Road, only to hear Mrs. Storrs on the answer phone. "If the caller will please speak clearly after the long tone." But Lewis put down the phone without leaving any message. He always felt awkward and tongue-tied at such moments. Morse was still at the kitchen table in number 15 when Lewis rang through. "So, it looks as if they're in the clear," Lewis concluded. "How far is it to Bath?" 75 miles. "Sunday morning, no traffic, 3 hours there and back. Yeah, there's a murder to commit in the middle, though. 3.5. Well, he didn't use his own car. That was in the hotel garage, keys with the porter. Haven't you heard of a duplicate set, Lewis? What if he was locked in, or blocked in? He unlocked himself and unblocked himself, all right. He must have left about 4 o'clock, because he was in bed having breakfast before 8. Yes. And what was Owens doing, up and dressed and ready to let the murderer in at 5:30 or so? Perhaps he couldn't sleep. You're not taking this seriously, are you? All right, I agree. Cross them off the list. Have we got a list? Not many on it, I know, but I'd like to see our other runner in the Lonsdale Stakes. Do you want me to see him? No, you get back here. The Soccos are nearly through. With which Morse put down the phone, got to his feet and opened the door of the refrigerator. The usual items: milk, Flora, bacon, eggs, grapefruit juice, 2 cans of Courage Bitter. Morse found a glass on a shelf and poured himself a beer. The liquid was cool and sharp on his dry throat, and very soon he'd opened the second can. By the time the Sockos were ready to move into the kitchen, the glass had been dried and replaced. Upstairs, Owen's study was in considerable disarray. The desk drawers, now liberally dusted with fingerprint powder, had been taken out, their contents strewn across the floor. Morse smiled sadly to himself as he looked at the wreckage. The murderer had been looking for something, documents, papers, a basis for blackmail. Exactly what had he been looking for? Exactly what had he found? Downstairs, Morse had to consider the living room. He'd already given permission for the body to be removed, and now chalk marks outlined the body's former configuration on the settee. But the room was dominated by blood, the stains, the smell of blood. He stood enviously in front of the black Revox CD player and pressed the play panel. Immediately he recognized Das Lied von der Erde. No man is wholly bad, perhaps. His attention turned to the shelf beneath, where there was a row of videos. Faulty Towers, Morecambe and Wise, Christmas shows, Porridge, and several other TV classics. And two which were obviously pornographic. Grub Screws, with its lurid Technicolor cover poses, hardly promised a course in carpentry, and the plain covered yet succinctly entitled Sucks and Fucks seemed to speak for itself. Then Lewis came in. "Oh, good one, that's it." He raised Grub Screws aloft. "Sergeant Dixon had it on his stag night." "You'd like to see it again, you mean?" "Not me, sir. Those things get ever so boring after a while. But don't let me stop you." "Me? I've got more important things to do." "High time I saw Cornford for a start. Fix something up, Lewis. The sooner the quicker." Lewis nodded. "Oh, and I rang the stores again, sir. They're back in Oxford. Seems they had a bit of lunch in Burford on the way. Do you want me to go round?" Morse looked at him in some puzzlement. What the hell for, Lewis? Dr. Cornford would be happy to meet Morse whenever it suited. That afternoon? In his rooms in Lonsdale, then? 5 o'clock. "I suppose it's a bit early to offer you a drink, Chief Inspector." Morse looked at his wristwatch. "Scotch, please." Dennis Cornford began to pour an increasingly liberal tot of Glenmorangie into a tumbler. "Say when?" "When?" "No ice here, I'm afraid. Normally I would join you, but I'm reading the second lesson in chapel tonight." It was Cornford's turn to consult his wristwatch. "So we mustn't be all that long. What do you want to see me about?" "Well..." Morse took a deep breath, then told Cornford of the murder that morning of Geoffrey Owens. Told him that various documents pointed to a systematic campaign of blackmail on Owens' part, and that there was reason to believe that he, Cornford, might have been one of the victims. "Are you sure of this?" Cornford said. "No, not sure at all, sir, but you've got your job to do." "You haven't received any blackmail letters?" "No." "Then I'll be quite blunt, if I may, sir. Is there anything you can think of that could have been used to compromise you in some way?" Cornford considered the question. "I've done a few things I'm not very proud of, haven't we all? But I'm fairly sure I got away with them. That was in another country, anyway." "And besides, the wench is dead." "Yes." "Do you want to tell me about them?" "No. But only because it would be an embarrassment for me and a waste of time for you. You're a married man, I understand." "Yes, and before someone else tells you, my wife is American, about half my age, and extremely attractive." "She hasn't been troubled by anonymous letters, anything like that?" "She hasn't told me of anything." "Would she tell you?" "She would, I think, yes." Did Morse sense a hesitation in Cornford's reply? "But you'd have to ask her." She's not around. She'll be coming over to chapel shortly." Cornford looked again at his wristwatch. "You get on well with Mr. Storrs?" Morse asked. "I've never got to know Julian all that well, really." The chapel bell had begun to ring now, a series of monotonous notes, melancholy like a curfew. 10 minutes to go. Cornford got to his feet and smiled. "Come ye to church, good people, come and pray." Morse nodded. "Do you mind me asking you when you got up this morning, sir?" "Early. I went out jogging just before 7. "You didn't go out after that? In the car, perhaps?" "Well, I don't have a car. My wife does, but it's garaged out in New Road." "Quite a way away?" "Yes, quite a way away." As Morse walked down the creaking wooden stairs, he thought Cornford would probably make a splendid master of Lonsdale, a civilized, courteous man. Just 2 things worried him. The first only slightly. If Cornford was going to quote Houseman, he jolly well ought to do it accurately. And he might be wholly wrong about the second. The bedroom door opened a few moments after Morse reached the bottom of the staircase. What was all that about? Couldn't you hear? Most of it, Shelley Cornford admitted. The bell still tolled. Good people come and pray. Cornford pulled on his gown, put his arms around his wife and looked unblinkingly into her eyes. "Have you got anything to pray for?" Shelley Cornford smiled. "I'm going to pray for you, Dennis. For you to become master. I want that more than anything in the world. Not for me, my darling. For you." "Nothing else?" "Such as what?" "Some people pray for forgiveness. Sometimes." Morse had walked to the lodge, where he stood in the shadows, reading the sporting notices and hoping that his presence was unobserved, when he saw them. Cornford, accompanied by a woman in black, emerging from the old staircase. The bell had stopped ringing now, and Morse walked to the King's Arms in Broad Street, where he ordered a pint of bitter and sat down in the back bar. In the Hilary term, on Sunday evenings only, it had become a tradition for the electric lighting to be switched off in the great hall of Lonsdale, and for candles to provide the illumination. On such evenings, it was the custom at high table for the visiting preacher, on this occasion a black bishop from Central Africa, to sit on the right side of the master, with the chaplain on the left, and in recent years also for one student to be invited by each of the fellows in rotation. That evening the student was Anthony Plummer, the new organ scholar, who'd been invited by Julian Storrs for the very good reason that the 2 of them had attended the same school, the Services School, Dartmouth. "Where's your father now?" Storrs asked. "Last I heard he was running some NATO exercise in Belgium." "Colonel now, isn't he?" "Brigadier." "My goodness." "You were with him in India, I think?" Storrs nodded. "Only a captain, though. I followed my father into the Royal Artillery there. Spent a couple of years trying to teach the natives how to shoot. Not much good at it, I'm afraid." "The natives?" Storrs laughed. "No, me. I wasn't really cut out for service life." Angela Storrs now complimented Plummer on the anthem, through which he'd conducted his largely female choir during the service. "You enjoyed it, Mrs. Storrs?" "Yes, but to be quite truthful, I do prefer boy sopranos." "Why's that?" "Oh, one just feels it, that's all. Don't ask me why. One just feels that sort of thing, don't you agree? One shouldn't try to rationalize everything." 3 places lower down the table, one of the dons whispered into his neighbour's ear, "If that woman gets into the lodge, I'll piss all over her primroses." Soon after this, conversation ceased abruptly as the master banged his gavel, and the assembled company rose to its feet. Benedictus benedicatur. Most now repaired to the SCR, where coffee and port were being served. The master and Julian Storrs stood side by side, buttocks turned towards the fire. "Bishop on his way back to the station, then?" "On his way back to Africa, I hope," said the master. "Bloody taxi would have to be laid, wouldn't it? None of you lot with a car here." Cornford, who had followed their conversation, now edged towards them, sipping his coffee. "Dennis there was no help either." "I sold my old Metro just before Christmas, master. I only live about 300 yards away." The words could have sounded light-hearted, yet somehow they didn't. "Shelley's got a car, though?" Cornford nodded cautiously. "Parked a mile away." The master smiled. "Oh, yes, I remember." Half an hour later, as they walked towards Holywell Street, Shelley Cornford put her arm through her husband's and squeezed it, but she felt no response. Cornford was hanging his overcoat in the entrance hall. "Coffee?" Shelley suggested. "I've just had some." "I'll put the kettle." "No, leave it." His words cut sharply across hers. "Why are you lying to me?" "What?" "Shut up! You've been unfaithful to me, I know that. You know that." "But I haven't." "Don't lie. I can't put up with your lies." The words were like a whiplash across his wife's face. "Once," she whispered. "Who with?" "It didn't mean anything." "Who?" She closed her eyes, unable to answer. "Who was it?" Still she made no answer. "Shall I tell you?" He knew. She realized he knew. And now, her eyes still firmly shut, she spoke the name. "You went to the master's lodge?" "Yeah." "To his bedroom?" "Yes." "You stripped naked for him?" "Yes." "And you had sex?" "Yes." "How many times?" "Once." Cornford pulled on his Barber jacket. "I did it for you, Dennis. You must know that." He said nothing. "How did you know?" "It's not what people say. It's the way they say it. I knew tonight. I knew before tonight." "How could you have known? Tell me!" Cornford turned the lock, and for a few moments stood at the half-open door, admitting a draught of air that felt bitterly cold. Then the door banged shut behind him. In the King's Arms, Morse had been remarkably abstemious. After his first pint, and after visiting the loo to inject himself, he had ordered a spinach and mushroom lasagna with salad. The constituents of this offering had never much appealed to him, but the hospital dietitian had been particularly enthusiastic about such fare. A cigarette would have been a paradisal plus, yet he managed to desist. He was, however, debating whether to take a few more calories in liquid form, when the landlord was suddenly beside him. "Inspector, I didn't see you come in. This is for you. It's been here a couple of weeks." Morse took the square printed card. "Let me tell you of a moving experience. Very moving. The furniture van is fetching my effects to Oxford at last, and on March 18th I'll be celebrating my south-facing patio with a shower of champagne at 53 Morris Villas, Cowley. Join me. Deborah Crawford." Across the bottom was a handwritten note. "Make it, Morse. D.C." Morse remembered her well, a slim, unmarried blonde at a Metropolitan Police party. He'd given her his address, which she vowed she'd never forget, which clearly she had. "She was anxious for you to get it," began the landlord, but as he spoke, the door opened and he turned to the newcomer. "Dennis, I didn't expect you in tonight. No good us running 6 miles Sunday morning if we're going to put the weight back on Sunday night." Morse looked up, puzzled. "You mean you went jogging together this morning?" "5 of us, actually, wasn't it, Dennis?" "What time?" 7:15. We met here. Got back just before 8, Cornford said, pointing to Morse's empty glass. "What's that?" "No, it's my round." "Nonsense." "Well, if you insist." "Come back, Dennis. Oh, God, please, God, let him come back safely. Come back tonight." For over 2 hours, Shelley Cornford had been sitting upright against the pillows, her mind tormented with the fear that her husband had disappeared into the night, never to return. And again she recalled that terrible conversation. "Clixby? Shelley? Dennis knows." "What?" "Dennis knows about us." "How did he find out?" "He didn't. I don't follow. He guessed he was talking to you tonight." "After Hall, you mean?" "Did you say anything?" "Have you taken leave of your senses?" "He must have had some reason." "Didn't you deny it?" "But it was true." "What the hell's that got to do with it? You're not being very intelligent, are you?" "What are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean, do? What do you expect me to do?" "I don't know. I want help." "But, Shelley, this is something you and Dennis have got to work out for yourselves. God, you're a shit, aren't you? With a capital S. Look, is Dennis there? Of course not, you fool. Please don't call me a fool, Shelley. Just remember who you're talking to. At 11:25, she heard the key in the front door. Dennis! Get to bed. I'll sleep in the spare room. No, I'll sleep there. I don't give a sod who sleeps where. We're not sleeping in the same room, that's all. Oh, please, let's talk, please. The tears ran in furrows down her cheeks. We're finished, Shelley. You can do what you want now, I don't care. You're a born prick teaser. I can't live with you any longer. I can't live with a picture of you opening your legs to another man. Can you get that into your thick skull? He turned away, and she heard the door of the spare bedroom close, then open again. When was it? Tell me, when? This morning. When I was out jogging. Yes, she whispered. You said you'd give anything to see me become master. Well, don't you understand? I wouldn't. But I'd have given anything for you to be faithful to me. He turned away once more. Never had Morse spent such a horrifying night. Head weighted with pain, ears throbbing, stomach in spasms, gullet afire with bile. He'd imagined himself on the verge of fainting, of vomiting, of having a stroke, of entering cardiac arrest. As he lay turning in his bed, Morse had longed for a sign of the brightening sky through his window. During the seemingly unending night, he'd consumed water, Alka-Seltzer, black coffee, and a week's dosage of Nurofen Plus. No alcohol, though. Not one drop. At last, Morse had decided to abandon alcohol. At 7:30, Lewis, who was the only other person who had a key to Morse's flat, looked into the bedroom. You look awful, sir. Oh, for Christ's sake, Lewis, don't you know if somebody says you look awful, you feel awful? Shall I get you a bit of breakfast? No! Morse swung his legs out of bed. Just turn out those pockets, will you? He pointed to the suit and shirt thrown carelessly over the only chair in the bedroom. Time I had a change of clothes. Lewis held up the invitation card. Who's your girlfriend? Make it Morse, DC. That card is wholly private and... But Morse got no further. Christ, he whispered. Lewis, I think you've done it again. The remainder of that Monday was unproductive and anticlimactic, with a morning of euphoria followed by an afternoon of blood trouble. Hospital instructions had been for him to take 4 daily readings of his blood sugar level. At lunchtime, it registered high. Morse became worried and returned to his flat, where he sat in his armchair, decided he lacked the energy even to turn on the CD player, and soon fell fast asleep. At 6, he rang Lewis to say he would be doing nothing more that day. Just before 7, he took his blood sugar once again, and finding it somewhat dramatically reduced, decided to celebrate with a small glass of Glenfiddich. The following morning, feeling much refreshed and eager to get on with things, Morse had been at his desk for half an hour when Lewis entered, holding a report. Ballistics, sir. Came in last night. Morse could no more follow the technical terminology of ballistics reports than he could recall the map of Bosnia, so he acquainted himself with the summary only. Rachel James was fatally shot by a single bullet fired from a range of circa 45 centimetres. Geoffrey Owens by 2 bullets fired from a range of circa 100 centimetres. The pistol used in each case, of .577-inch calibre, was of the type frequently used by HM forces. Quite certainly the same pistol was used in each killing. Morse sat back in the black leather armchair, looking mildly satisfied with life. Yes, very interesting. Same revolver. Pistol, same difference. I think most of us had assumed that anyway. Really? Morse's smile was irritatingly benign. Same revolver, same murderer? I suppose so. Fair enough. Now, let's consider a few possibilities. Rachel was shot through the kitchen window, and the murderer was taking a risk. Revolvers are notoriously inaccurate even at close range. The shooting of Owens, though, took place inside the house, and he shot in the chest, not the head. Quite different modus operandi. Lewis smiled. So we've got two moduses operandi. Two modi, Lewis. So it could be two murderers. Highly improbable on the face of it, but, well, as I see it, sir, Owens was probably murdered by somebody he knew. Owens was dressed, so perhaps they'd arranged to meet. But Rachel probably didn't know him. Or her. You're still assuming both murders were committed by the same person, Lewis. And you don't think so? Morse shrugged. Could have been lovers, husband and wife, or two completely separate people. You know, sir, I shall be much happier when we've got a bit more of the routine work done. Can't we leave a few of the ideas until we've checked everything a bit? Lewis, you're preaching to the converted. We've got to go back to the beginning. In our beginning is our end. Or is it in our end is our beginning? Where do you suggest we begin then, sir? Morse considered the question. I'll tell you something that would be useful, sir. Some idea where the gun is. The pistol, you mean? Sorry. If only we knew where that was. Oh, I think I know where we're likely to find the pistol, Morse said. We've been assuming that it was Owens who was pulling all the strings, and that the two candidates at Lonsdale had as good a motive as anybody for wishing him out of the way. It's now clear that neither Storrs nor Cornford could have been responsible for both murders, and increasingly unlikely that either could have been responsible even for one. So where does this leave us? It's a bit like a crossword clue you sometimes get stuck with. You think one bit of the clue's the definition and the other bit's a build-up of the letters. Then you realise you've got things the wrong way round. Perhaps I'm reading the clue the wrong way round here, Lewis. What if someone was blackmailing Owens? We've spoken about it before. What if Rachel James came to discover something that would upset his carefully loaded apple cart and blackmailed him? What, trying to climb aboard the gravy train? Exactly. I suspect she got to know about his blackmailing activities and threatened to expose him. Lewis was looking decidedly impatient. Sir, could we please get along to Owen's office first and get a few simple facts established? Just what I was about to suggest. See the editor, his colleagues, that personnel fellow, especially him. Go through his desk and drawers. Learn about his men friends, his girlfriends, his enemies, his habits. Good job there's two of us, sir. Pardon? Hefty agenda. Not really. Far easier than it sounds, if you get off straight away. But you're not joining me? Not today, no. One or two important things to do. Such as? Well, I've been told to take things a bit more gently. I'd better take notice of my medical advisers. I think a little siesta this afternoon. Siesta? Morse looked down at his desk a little sheepishly. Lewis knew he was lying. Come on, sir. It's that invite you had, isn't it? Deborah Crawford? In a way. Why are you being so secretive? Because it needs a bit more thinking about. Morse looked at his wristwatch. Sit down, then. It wasn't Deborah Crawford. It was her initials, D.C. When we found that list in the file, I jumped the gun. I assumed that J.S. was Julian Storrs. I think I was right about that. And I assumed that D.C. was Dennis Cornford. And I think I was wrong about that. I don't believe Owens ever knew Cornford at all. But he knew another D.C. The woman at number 1, Adele Beatrice Cecil. Owens knew her well enough to call her Della. D.C. Now, consider for a minute what an important figure she is in the case. She's the one who sees Owens leave for work. She's the one who rings to tell him the police are in Bloxham Close. But she might not be telling the truth. Lewis sat in silence. Now, your objection to Owens being a suspect was the time factor. Impossible, you said, and of course you were right. Oh, thank you, sir. In one way, and quite wrong in another. Let's stick to our idea that the list of initials we found was a blackmail list, and that she's on it, Della Cecil. He's got something on her, too. So, when he asks her to help him in his plan to get Rachel out of the way, She's little option but to cooperate. Any idea what this plan was, sir? That's the trouble. Too many ideas. Try me. All right. Possible plan. Ready? Owens drives to work at 10 to 7, and she follows him in her car. When he's parked the car, when his entry's recorded, he goes into the building, then immediately leaves via a side door and gets into her car, parked along the street. Back in Kidlington, he murders Rachel James and doesn't return to work. He goes into Della's house and waits. When the police arrive, a call is made to his office, to his answer phone. A telephonic communication gets recorded between her phone and Owen's office. Then all he's got to do is emerge amid all the excitement. Well? You make it up as you go along, sir. Of course I bloody do. That's what I'm here for. But once we accept there could be 2 people involved, there are dozens of possibilities. But it couldn't... What's wrong with it? Tell me. Let's start with the car. Cars, plural. All right, he's parked his car. I didn't say that. I deliberately said the car. It could have been hers. It's the card number that's recorded, not the car number. She could have driven his car. They could have swapped. I'm talking about Owen's car, all right. Bloxham Drive was cordoned off. The lads let him in because he lived there. I saw the car myself. So, she could have left it nearby anyway. Well, it still couldn't have happened like you say, sir. No? No. He was seen just at the time Rachel was being murdered, seen by the personnel manager. We haven't got a statement from him yet. Well, he's been away, you know that. Yes, I do know that, Lewis. You spoke to him. Lewis nodded. On the phone? On the phone. Through the operator? Lewis nodded again. Do you know who she probably put you through to? Asked Morse, slowly. The light dawned in Lewis's eyes. You mean she could have put me through to Owens himself? Morse shrugged. That's what we've got to find out. Owens was deputy personnel manager, we know that. Do you really think that's what happened? I don't know. I know one thing, though. It could have happened that way. Miss Adele Cecil had spent the previous evening and night in London, where she had addressed a meeting of the Essex Young Conservative Association at Durrance, a traditional English hotel in George Street. It was while at breakfast that she had taken the telephone message. How did you know I was here? I'm a detective. Yes, she remembered him. White-haired, supercilious, sarcastic. I shan't be back until lunchtime. The trout? 12:30. They sat facing each other at a low wooden table. Good time at the conference? Lovely, she lied. I'm glad it went well, he lied. Well? Just 1 or 2 questions. You've already signed a statement about the morning Rachel was murdered. Well, you know that, surely. And it was the truth? You couldn't have been wrong? Of course not. You told me that once in a while you had a heart-to-heart with Rachel. I think those were your words. So? Did you know she was having an affair with Julian Storrs? She nodded slowly. Did you mention this to Mr. Owens? Morse's eyes were blue and unblinking, and her eyes held his. What the hell for? Morse made no direct answer. Then his voice was very quiet. Did you ever have an affair with Julian Storrs? She looked long into the blazing log fire. One night, in Blackpool, at a party conference. Morse could hardly hear the words. He resumed his questioning. Your father served in India in the army. How did you know that? He's in Who's Who, or was. Your mother died of cancer 12 years ago. He died 2 years ago. You inherited his estate. Estate? He left all his money to the bookmakers. No heirlooms, mementos, that sort of thing. What sort of thing? A pistol, possibly? A service pistol? She appeared puzzled. You don't seriously think I had anything to do with... My job is to ask questions. Well, the answer's no. Any more? Where were you last Sunday morning? In bed, asleep until the police woke me up. And then? I was frightened, and you want the truth. I'm still bloody frightened. Morse looked at her again, attractive, vulnerable, a little nervous perhaps. Not frightened, though, surely. Was she hiding something? Is there anything more, anything at all you can tell me about this business? And immediately he sensed that she could. One thing, perhaps. Julian asked me to a guest night last November, and I sat next to a fellow called Dennis Cornford. I only met him that once. Morse sought to stop his voice from trembling. What about him? I saw him in the drive, that's all. Thursday night, about 8. He was walking, no car, and he turned into number 15. Jeff Owens let him in. You're quite sure it was him? Oh, yes. Morse drove the Jaguar towards Kidlington, and as he crossed the roundabout into 5 Mile Drive, his car phone began ringing. It was Lewis, an excited Lewis, calling from the newspaper offices. I just spoke to the personnel manager, sir. It was him. Lewis, your pronouns. What exactly was who? It wasn't Owens I spoke to on the phone. It was the personnel manager himself. Morse replied only after a pause. Why don't I take more notice of you in the first place? Well done. We're getting things straight at last. Did your girl tell you anything important? I don't think so. So she wasn't involved? I'm not sure. But it might be Owens had something on Cornford as well. Cornford? She tells me, our Tory, that she saw him going into Owens' house last Thursday. Phew. Just after 4 p.m, Morse rang the bell beside the red-painted front door of an elegant ashlar house just across from the Holywell music room. There was no answer. He retraced his steps to the porter's lodge at Lonsdale. Do you know if Dr. Cornford's in college? The duty porter rang a number, then shook his head. Doesn't seem to be in his rooms, sir. Has he been in today? This morning. Called for his mail. You've no idea where he is? The porter shook his head. Doesn't come in much of a Wednesday. Usually has his faculty meeting. Can you try him for me there? It's important. The porter rang the second number. They've not seen him, sir. Seems he didn't turn up for the 2 o'clock meeting. Have you got his home number? He's ex-directory, sir. So am I. You know who I am, don't you? No, sir. Oh, forget it. Morse heard the news back at HQ from Lewis. A body had been found in a garage rented under the name of Dr. Cornford. For a while Morse sat silent. I only met him the once, you know, Lewis. Well, twice, really. I liked him. It isn't Cornford, though, sir. It's his wife. Tell me about it, said Morse. In St. Aldate's police station, Chief Inspector Warner told the story economically. Shelley Cornford had been found in her car with a hose pipe through the window. The garage had been bolted on the inside. The immediate cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning from exhaust fumes. A brief note had been left on the passenger seat. I'm so sorry, Dennis. I can't forgive myself for what I did. I never loved anyone but you, my darling. No marks of violence. 97 milligrams of blood alcohol, the equivalent of 2 or 3 stiffish gins. Suspicion of foul play? None. Do you want to see her? Morse shook his head. You'd better see him, though. He's in the canteen. We've finished with him, really. Tell me about it. Dennis Cornford's voice was flat, almost mechanical. On Sunday, she told me she'd been to bed with another man that morning. The note. That's what she was referring to. Yes. Nothing else? No. Do you know who the other man was? Yes. Clixby Bream. She told you that? Yes. So she couldn't have had anything to do with the Owens murder? No, nor could the master. Did you have anything to do with it? No. Why didn't you tell me you knew Owens? I didn't want to get involved. Why did you go to see Owens last Thursday? I knew Owens a bit through various things I did for his newspaper. I'd done an article for him on medieval Oxford, which Owens said needed shortening. That night I had to go to the Kidlington History Society. He lived 5 minutes away, so we discussed some changes. I got a bus back about 9. What will you do now? I left a note for the master. I've withdrawn my nomination. I'm sorry. Yes, I think you are, aren't you? On Friday, Lewis entered Morse's office with the post. 6 official-looking letters, a square white envelope marked private, and an airmail letter postmarked Washington. Inside the white envelope was a card. Morse read the brief message. We all miss your miserable presence in the ward. Look after yourself. Affectionately, Janet, brackets McQueen. P.S. I looked through your records from many years ago. Know something? I found your Christian name. Why are you looking so cheerful? Asked Lewis. But Morse made no answer, and opened the letter from America. Washington, 4th of March. Dear Morse, I know you're frightened of flying, but a visit here, especially in the spring, is something not to be missed. We'll get together for a jar on my return, brackets April, and don't leave it too long before you take your pension. As I, Peter, brackets Imbert. P.S. I know you've always wept to Wagner, but I've always wept to Verdi, and the best Christmas present I had was the Carry-On recording of Don Carlos. Morse handed the letter to Lewis. Isn't he the old Metropolitan Commissioner? Morse nodded. Washington, D.C., that'll be, sir. Where else? Washington, C.D., County Durham. Oh. What's your programme today, sir? Well, we've done most of the spade work, except the Harvey Clinic side of things. And that's in hand, you say? Seeing the woman this morning. She's just back from a few days' holiday. Who's she again? Remind me. Dawn Charles. She's the receptionist there. They say if anybody's likely to know what's going on, she is. What time are you seeing her? 10 o'clock. She's got a little flat out at Bicester. You joining me? No. I ought to see Stores again. Morse then looked through Sir Peter's letter once again. Don Carlos. The 2 words stood out and stared at him. Another D.C. It was amazing how many had cropped up in their inquiries, and in Morse's mind the name of the opera merged with a name. Don, chiming in with Dawn, and Carlos with Charles. Was it Dawn Charles who held the key to the mystery? Did they belong to her, the initials in the manila file? Morse's eyes gleamed with excitement. Lewis, I shall be coming with you to Bicester. Dawn Charles looked nervous when she opened the door of her flat and led the 2 detectives into the grey-carpeted lounge. The elder of the 2, the white-haired one, complimented her on such an attractive residence. I bought it at the top of the property boom for 58, only worth 34 now. Oh dear. The man made her feel uneasy. But he couldn't possibly know the truth, and she thought she could handle things. On Radio Oxford she'd heard P.D. James's advice to criminal suspects. Keep it short, keep it simple. Don't change a word unless you have to. Coffee? I've only got instant, I'm afraid. We prefer instant, don't we, Sergeant? Lovely, said Lewis, who would have preferred tea. 2 minutes later, Dawn held a jug over the steaming cups. Milk? Please. Thank you. Sugar? Just the one, from Lewis. A shake of the head from Morse. She stirred 2 heaped teaspoonfuls into her own. How on earth, Morse said, do you keep your figure with all that sugar? She coloured slightly. Something to do with metabolic rate, so they tell me at the clinic. Ah, yes, the clinic. She knew Stores, she claimed, only as a patient. She'd known Turnbull, she claimed, only as a consultant. She knew Owens, she claimed, not at all. Lewis produced the letter stating Julian Storr's prognosis. Was this photocopy made at the clinic? I didn't copy it. Well, someone must have. I didn't copy it. Any idea who might have? I didn't copy it. It was hardly a convincing performance, and she was aware that both men knew she was lying. And quietly the truth came out. Owens she had met when the press had come along for the clinic's 25th anniversary. He must have heard something that night about Mr. Storrs. After Mr. Turnbull died, Owens telephoned her, asked her if she could copy a letter for him. He'd offered her £500, and she'd agreed. It was a betrayal of trust, she knew that, but she desperately needed the money. Morse had remained silent. His attention focused, it seemed, on the long, black-stockinged legs. We shall have to ask you to come in and make an official statement, Lewis said. Now? That'll be best. Perhaps not, Morse intervened. It's not all that urgent, Miss Charles. We'll be in touch soon. At the door, Morse thanked her for the coffee. Not the best homecoming, I'm afraid. Only myself to blame, she said, her voice tight. Where did you go? I didn't go anywhere. You stayed here? I didn't go anywhere. What was that about? Asked Lewis as he drove back along the A34. She's not a good liar. Lovely figure, though. Legs right up to her armpit. She'd have gone into the chorus line at the windmill. I read somewhere they all had to be the same height and the same build. Morse was silent, his eyes gleaming. Lewis backed into the first available space in Polstead Road, and the two men walked a little way along the short road of amply proportioned 19th-century houses. Wouldn't mind living here, Lewis said. Morse nodded. Very civilised. On the gravel in front of the Storrs residence stood a small, pale grey deregistration Citroën, a thin pink stripe around its bodywork. Someone's in, said Morse. Mrs. Storrs, perhaps. He's got a BMW, a woman's car, that, anyway. Really? Morse was still peering through the Citroën's front window when Lewis returned from ringing. No one in. Another weekend break? I could ring the porter's lodge. You do that small thing, Lewis. I'll be... Morse pointed vaguely towards the far end of the road. It was at the Anchor, a few minutes later, as Morse sat behind a pint of John Smith's, that Lewis came in to report on the Storrs. Away again for the weekend, their whereabouts not vouchsafed to the lodge. Morse received the news without comment. If somebody came to you with a letter, a photocopied letter claiming your missus was having an affair with the milkman, Lewis grinned. I'd be dead worried. We've got a woman. What would you do? Show it to the missus? Well, not for a start. Try to find out if it was genuine. Exactly. So Storrs gets a copy of that letter. He's nobody's fool. He's not going to give in to blackmail just on somebody's say-so. A letter he'd pretty certainly not seen before. Unless Turnbull showed it to him. Doubt it. Death certificate, wasn't it? He'd let Storrs down more gently than that. What, you mean if Storrs tried to find out if it was genuine, he'd probably go along to the clinic? Morse nodded, like a benevolent schoolmaster encouraging a promising pupil. And show it did Dawn Charles. Who else? She's the sort of practice manager there, if anybody is. And how long did it take you to get the truth out of her? You think Storrs did as well? Pretty certainly, I'd say. He probably rumbled our receptionist straight away. Slowly Lewis sipped his orange juice. We're not exactly galloping towards the finishing post, are we, sir? Morse looked up in surprise. Why do you say that, Lewis? That's exactly what we are doing. Friday afternoon was very busy, and for Lewis very interesting. It began with Morse asking, if you had a posh car, which way would you go to Bath? A34, M4, A46. What if you had an old banger? Same way. What's wrong with the Burford Cirencester way? Nothing at all if you like scenery. Or you don't like motorway driving. Another question. How do we find out which bank the stores use? They could have different banks, sir. Shall I ring around? Morse nodded. And try to find out how they've been spending their money recently. It took Lewis only 10 minutes to discover that they both banked at Lloyd's Headington branch. The manager was fully cooperative, but of only limited assistance. It was not, in cases such as this, unethical for confidential material concerning clients to be disclosed, but Lewis would have to contact the inspection department in Bristol. Which Lewis promptly did, receiving, however, the disappointing news that the information required was unlikely as yet to be fully ready. With the volume of credit card transactions ever growing and with inevitable delays in processing and clearance, well, it would take a little time. Later this afternoon? No chance of that, I'm afraid. Tomorrow morning? Lewis heard a deep sigh. We don't usually... It is very urgent, you say? In Morse's office, a note on yellow paper was sellotaped to the desk. Lewis, 3:45, just after the Diab Centre. Royal Crescent, Bath, informs me the stores, Herr und Frau, are staying there again. Ring me at home after the Archers. M. On the desk also was a letter from the Tame and District Diabetic Association addressed to Detective Chief Inspector Morse. Dear Sir, welcome to the club. We meet on the first Thursday of each month in the town hall in Tame, and we shall be delighted if you can come to speak to us. During this last year we've been fortunate to welcome several very well-known people, for example, Dr. David Matthews, Leslie Hallett, Professor Harry Keane, Angela Storrs, and Willie Rushton. We're still looking for speakers for 96-97. Any hope of you filling one of these slots? Concerned about the adequacy of the Jaguar's petrol allowance, Morse had requisitioned an unmarked police car, which, just before 10 a.m. on Saturday, was heading south along the A34, with Lewis at the wheel. As they approached Abingdon, Morse turned on Classic FM and almost immediately turned it off, as he recognised the Brandenburg Concerto No. 2. I'm sorry to say I sometimes get a little bored even in the company of Johann Sebastian. I thought it was rather nice. Lewis. He may be terrific. He may be terrible, but Bach's never nice. Morse sank back into his seat and said virtually nothing for the rest of the journey. As soon as they'd stopped outside the Royal Crescent Hotel in Bath, Morse, as had been agreed, rang through on the mobile phone to the deputy manager. No problem, it appeared. The stores had gone off somewhere in the BMW. The coast was clear. Morse got out of the car. Good luck in Bristol. If you find out what I hope you're going to, the battle's half won, and it's mostly thanks to you. It was you who figured it all out. Wouldn't have done, though, without your visits to Soho. Pardon, sir? To see the chorus line at the windmill. But I've never... Legs right up to her armpits, you said. And that was the second time you'd used those words, Lewis, remember? Sarah Hickman, the deputy manager, was from Leicestershire, tall and slim in a businesslike suit. She had, she said, been able to re-interview almost all of the service personnel who'd been on duty the previous weekend, but there seemed little to add to the details communicated earlier by the manager himself. The room the stores had slept in, room 36, was a standard twin, not a standard double, and in fact the couple had asked for the same room again if it was available, which it was. Might we be able to see some itemised bills from last weekend? Morse said. Sarah Hickman smiled. I thought you might ask for them. And she read aloud from a small sheaf of bills in front of her. Last Saturday night they ate at table 26. He had carpaccio beef, truffled noodles and parmesan for his starter. For his main course, sea bass served with cream celeriac and fennel liqueur. Passion fruit mousse for sweet. She wasn't quite so adventurous. Consommé, baked plaice and green salad, and cream crackers and Edam. Good low-fat cheese, they tell me, Morse mumbled, recalling his hard-nosed dietitian. Now, Sunday morning, for breakfast Mr. Storrs ordered a full English for himself, no kidney though, and 2 fried eggs. Said his wife would like cereal, ricicles if we'd got some, brown toast and honey, fresh fruit compote, orange juice. Oh yes, and hot chocolate. The time? Would have been between 7:30 and 8. Both breakfasts went up together. And last night for dinner? They didn't eat here. This morning? They had breakfast in their room again, same as before for Mr. Storrs. How do you know it wasn't for her? Well, it's exactly what he ordered before. Look for yourself. She passed the order across the desk, and Morse saw the instructions. No tick against kidney. The figure 2 against eggs fried. I see what you mean. Morse's eyes continued down the form to the continental section, and saw ticks against Weetabix, semi-skimmed milk, natural yoghurt, toast, brown, coffee, decaffeinated. I shall have to have copies of those forms, said Morse. Of course. Sarah got to her feet. I'll see that's done straight away. Shall we go to the bar? The day was brightening, and indeed was shortly to be brighter still. What would you like to drink, sir? Lovely question. As he waited for his beer, Morse walked through to the gents in the corridor just off the lounge. The two loos stood side by side, the men's and the ladies' logos unequivocally distinct on their adjacent doors. It would have been difficult even for the myopic Mrs. Adams to confuse the two, thought Morse. Men wore trousers, women wore skirts. Then he smiled to himself. But of course, if someone wore trousers, that only proved one thing, that the person in question was wearing trousers. Thank you. Thank you, dear, sweet old Mrs. Adams. 10 minutes later, as he worked his way through a generous plateful of smoked salmon sandwiches, Morse saw Sergeant Lewis appear in the doorway, a Lewis looking self-satisfied and raising his right thumb. At 2:30 p.m, Marilyn Hudson, a small and fair-complexioned chambermaid, was called into Sarah's office. Morse questioned her closely about the morning of the previous Sunday. You took them breakfast? Yes, sir. I took the tray in and put it on the dressing table. Were they in bed together? No, she was in bed. Difficult to miss her, really. Why do you say that? Well, it was her pyjamas, yellow and black and green stripes. Got the same pair now. I took their breakfast again this morning. Marilyn gave a nervous little giggle. Perhaps this time she changed them. She may have got 2 pairs, interposed Lewis. Morse scowled. But I didn't really see him, Marilyn continued. He was in the bathroom having a shave. The door was open a bit and he was still in his pyjamas. He said thank you. Would you have recognised him if he'd turned his head? Well, I'd seen them earlier in the hotel, but I didn't notice him as much as her, really. She was, ever so dressy and smart. She wore dark glasses and a white trouser suit, same as today. So, Morse said, what you're telling us is that you're pretty sure it was her, not quite so sure it was him. Marilyn considered the question. No, I'm pretty sure it was both of them, sir. Good girl, our Marilyn, confided Sarah. Morse looked across at her. You've still got the details of who was staying here last Saturday? Of course. Just a minute. She returned with a sheaf of registration cards, and Morse flicked them over one at a time. Suddenly he stopped, the familiar tingling of excitement across his shoulders. He handed the card to Lewis, and Lewis whistled softly as he read the name. Morse turned again to Sarah. Can you let us have a copy of the bill, account for room 15? You were right then, sir, Lewis whispered. You always said it was DC. Sarah came back and laid the account in front of Morse. Single room, number 15, just the one night. Paid by credit card. Morse looked through the items. No evening meal. No. No breakfast. No. Look, can we use your phone? Of course. Some 20 minutes later, Morse and Lewis emerged from the office and were walking behind reception when one of the guests came through from the entrance hall. Good God, what are you doing here? Asked Julian Storrs. Would you and your good lady like to join me for a drink, sir? Morse replied. In the bar? What do you think they're talking about up there, sir? He's probably telling her what to say. Morse and Lewis were seated side by side in the lounge. Julian Storrs and a black-tied waiter appeared almost simultaneously. Angela will be down in a minute, just changing. Then the waiter took their order. Large Glenfiddich for me, said Storrs. 2 pieces of ice. Same for me, Morse said. "Lewis? Does the budget run to an orange juice?" Morse turned to Stores. "And for your wife?" "Large gin and slimline tonic." "Slimline tonic," Morse repeated. "Cuts out the sugar, I believe." Stores made no comment. "I know your wife's diabetic, sir. We checked. We even checked on what you both had to eat last weekend." "Well done." "Only one thing puzzles me, your wife's breakfast on Sunday morning." He gestured to Lewis, who read from his notebook. "Ricicles, that's sort of sugar-frosted. My kids used to love 'em, sir. Toast, honey, a sort of fruit cocktail, orange juice, and hot chocolate." "Not, perhaps," added Morse, "the kind of breakfast a diabetic would normally order, all that sugar. Everything else she ate here was out of the diabetic cookbook." "Do you know anything about diabetes, Chief Inspector?" Angela Stores, dressed in the inevitable trouser suit, but minus the dark glasses, had obviously caught some of the conversation. "Not much," Morse admitted, as he sought to rise from his deep low chair. "I've only been diagnosed a week." "Oh, please don't get up." She took a seat next to her husband on the sofa. "I've had diabetes for 10 years. You'll learn soon enough. You see, one of the biggest dangers for insulin-dependent diabetics is not excessively high levels of blood sugar, but excessively low levels. Now, you're asking about last weekend, so let me tell you. On Saturday evening, my blood sugar was low, very low. And when Julian asked me about breakfast, I decided to play it safe. And if it's of any interest, I thoroughly enjoyed my sugary breakfast." The drinks had arrived. Morse drained his whiskey and thirsted for another. "Mrs. Stores, I'm going to ask you a very blunt question, and you must forgive me because that's my job. What would you say if I told you that you didn't sleep with your husband last Saturday night? That you slept with another man?" She smiled. "I'd hope he was a good lover." "But you'd deny it." "It's hardly worth denying." Morse turned to Stores. "And you, sir, what would you say if I told you that you didn't sleep with your wife last Saturday night, that you slept with another woman?" "I'd hope she was a good lover, I suppose." "But you'd deny it too?" "Of course." "Anything else you want to check?" asked Angela Stores. "Well, just the one thing, really, because I'm still not quite sure that I've got it right." Morse took a deep breath. "You say you came here with your husband in his BMW, late-ish last Saturday afternoon, stayed here together overnight, then drove straight back to Oxford next morning. Is that right, Mrs. Stores?" "Not quite, no. We drove back via Cirencester and Burford. We had lunch at a pub in Burford, and we had a look in 2 or 3 antique shops." "I see. In that case, it's about time we told you something else, don't you think so, Sergeant Lewis?" Apart from themselves and 2 dark-suited men drinking coffee in front of the fireplace, the lounge was now empty. Morse stared for a while out of the now rain-splattered windows. Almost reluctantly, it seemed, he made the penultimate revelation. "There was someone else staying here last Saturday night. Someone I think you both know. She was staying in room 15. That woman was Dawn Charles, a receptionist at the Harvey Clinic." "Good heavens!" Stores turned to his wife. "Did you realize that, darling?" "Don't be silly. I don't even know the woman." "It's an extraordinary coincidence, though." "Life's full of coincidences." "But this wasn't a coincidence, Mrs. Stores." It was Julian Stores who broke the awkward, ominous silence. "I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I didn't see her. Perhaps she came for the Abbey concert like we did. You'll have to ask her, surely." "If we do," said Morse simply, "it won't be long before we learn the truth. She's not such a competent liar as you are, sir, as the pair of you are." Stores got to his feet. "I am not going to sit here 1 minute longer and listen—" "Sit down!" said his wife, so assertively that one of the coffee drinkers turned his head briefly in her direction. Morse continued, "You both deny seeing Miss Charles whilst she was here?" "Yes." "Yes." "Sergeant, please." Lewis reopened his notebook and addressed Mrs. Stores. "So it couldn't possibly have been you, madam, who filled a car with petrol at Burford on that Saturday afternoon?" Last Saturday, certainly not. Have you lost your credit card recently? Why do you ask that? Because someone made a good job of signing your name, that's all. For £12 of unleaded at the Burford garage on the A40 at about 3 o'clock last Saturday. What exactly are you suggesting? Her voice sounded menacingly calm. I'm suggesting that you drove here to Bath in your own car, madam. Angela Storrs had risen to her feet herself now. You're right, Julian. We're not going to sit here a second longer. Come along. But she got no further than the exit, where 2 men stood barring her way. 2 dark-suited men. She turned round, her wide eyes blazing with fury as Lewis walked quietly towards her. Angela Miriam Storrs, it is my duty as a police officer to arrest you on a charge of murder. The murder of Geoffrey Gordon Owens. Being the tape-recorded statement made by Angela Storrs at Thames Valley Police HQ, Kidlington, Oxon, on the morning of the 11th of March, 1996. I murdered both of them, Rachel James and Geoffrey Owens. I'm a bit sorry about Rachel, but Julian desperately wanted to be master, and only one person wanted that more than he did, me. Julian was always going to be a good bet for the job, and we only had Cornford to beat. But this one thing that stood in the way suddenly became 2 things, because we learned that Julian would probably be dead within a year or so. We agreed never to say anything about it to anyone. Then there was that bloody man Owens. He'd written to Julian, and they met at the Randolph. All Owens wanted was money, and Julian's never been short of that. But Julian played it cool, and he went back to the bar later. One of the barmaids knew who Owens was. He'd covered functions there for the newspaper, and he was in the phone book. I knew what I was doing that morning. Julian had kept a pistol from his army days. I felt a great sense of power when I held it. But I don't think I meant to shoot him just to frighten him. Then I saw the ponytail that Julian had told me about behind the kitchen blind. Suddenly I realised how ridiculously easy it would be to solve all our problems. It wouldn't take a second. His head was only a couple of feet away. I fired point blank, and that was that. It was like somebody saying, "Do it." And I did it. Julian knew what happened, but he didn't have anything to do with it. We planned the second murder together, though. Julian knew someone must have shopped him at the clinic, and he soon found out it was Dawn Charles. So we had the hold on her now, and it wasn't difficult to get her to cooperate. She'd got money problems, and Julian promised to help if she did what we wanted. Julian drove to Bath in the BMW, and I followed in my car. He went M4, I went Burford way. He booked in and left his car in the hotel garage. I left my car in a side street. Dawn Charles went by train. She booked in as herself, of course. After we got back from the Abbey, Julian and I had dinner together, then I left. Julian rang Dawn Charles on the internal phone system, and all she had to do was go to our room. I drove back to Bicester, where I'd got the key to Dawn's flat. The hotel girl took them breakfast the next morning, and Dawn wore my pyjamas. She's my height and shape, so Julian tells me. The whole thing was very neat, really. But it was a mistake about all that sugar, I agree. I'd phoned Owens to tell him I'd have the money with me, and last Sunday morning I drove to Bloxham Drive again. I went to the back like before. He let me in, and we went through to his front room. I don't think either of us spoke. I took the pistol out of my shopping bag and shot him twice. Spring was particularly beautiful in North Oxford that year. Late one evening, Morse was walking home from the Cotswold house after a generous measure of Irish whiskey, when a car slowed down beside him, the front passenger window lowered. "Can I give you a lift anywhere?" "Hello?" "No, thank you, I only live—" Morse gestured vaguely towards the A40 roundabout. "Everything okay with you?" "Will be if you'd like to come and inspect my penthouse suite." "Thought you said it was a flat." For several seconds after she opened her eyes, Janet McQueen had no idea where she was. Then, gradually, as she lay in the green sheets, gradually it flooded back. How the Jaguar had stopped beside a large magnolia tree, how she'd looked at the hotel and her green eyes had widened. Beautiful. Morse had turned towards her. "You're beautiful too," he'd said quietly. "You've booked rooms for us here." And Morse had nodded. "Bit over the top, I know, but yes, the Sarah Siddons suite for myself. And for me? That's also called the Sarah Siddons suite." She was smiling contentedly as the concierge opened the passenger door. "Welcome to the Royal Crescent Hotel, madam." Morse was already up and sitting a few feet from her, reading the Times. "Hello," she said. He leaned over and kissed her lightly. "Headache?" "A bit." "You drink too much champagne." She smiled as she recalled their night together. Then, throwing back the duvet, she got out of bed. "Must have a shower. Shan't be long." "No rush." "Why don't you see if you can finish the crossword before I'm dressed? Make it a race." But Morse said nothing. He had already finished the crossword.